Test, test. Test.
Good morning. Good morning, Council. We're just going to take our seats, please. Good morning, Council. Excuse me. All right. The microphone's not working, apparently. Good morning, Council. We are going to take our seats and begin. Listen here, back row. Good morning, Council. Please rise for the national anthem. Please join in a moment of private contemplation. Thank you. Councillors, anyone that needs to leave early today? Councillor Leduc?
Yeah, Deputy Warden, I need to leave around 10:30.
Thank you. Councillor Sandu? Thank you. We will now move on to our calling of the roll.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. It's nice to see everyone again. Good morning. We have all members of council in attendance with a few exceptions. We have regrets from Councillor Cabral, regrets from Warden Clark, regrets from Councillor Greenlaw with alternate Councillor Laurie Hutchison in attendance, regrets from Councillor Michael Smith with alternate Councillor Henry Sonder in attendance, regrets from Councillor Vince Davern with alternate Councillor John Broderick in attendance, and you have your quorum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now call upon Councillor Dolan to read our resolution.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Fryer that the agenda for November the 12th, 2024 meeting of County Council be approved.
Thank you. And there's any questions or comments on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. And I will now call upon, this is usually me, but back to you again. Councillor Dolan.
Sorry, Deputy Warden, just disclosures and interest.
There's a backside to this paper. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. Are there any this today? Not seeing any at this time. If you do find yourself in that situation, we can deal with it at the time. Presentations and deputations, there are none, and our consent agenda will now call upon Councillor Burkett.
Good morning through you, Deputy Warden. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Norcross, that the Council communications and proclamations October the 22nd, 2024 to November the 11th, 2024 have been given due consideration be received.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. And now I will turn back to Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McClellan that the following council minutes be confirmed and adopted and committee of the whole reports be confirmed. County Council minutes, October 22nd, 2024. Committee of the whole report, October 22nd, 2024. Committee of the whole confidential report, October 22nd, 2024. Special budget meeting, Committee of the whole report, October 29, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Dolan. Are there any comments or questions on any of these? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. Presentations and consideration upon Councillor Cox.
Good morning. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Evans that the performance management recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated October 22nd, 2024 be approved.
Comments or questions, Council? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that is approved. I'll now call upon Councillor Leduc.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. We're at 9.2, Committee of Whole Report, Human Services. So the Human Services recommendation contained within the Committee of Whole report dated October 22nd, 2024 be approved. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. And moving back to Councillor Dolan.
Thank you to Deputy Warden. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Measures that the corporate services recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated October 22nd, 2024 be approved, including the confidential item.
Not seeing any comments or questions. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to our special budget and Committee of the Whole. And we'll go back to Councillor Dolan for our special budget, the Committee of the Whole report.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Anderson that the recommendation contained within the Special Budget Committee of the Whole report dated October 29th, 2024 be approved.
Thank you for that. And at this time, Council, if there's anything to be pulled, comments or questions, Councillor Priest? Post. Thank you.
Okay, it's going to work. I need to declare a conflict of interest for any part of the budget that pertains to GBGH, as I'm an employee there.
Thank you for that. Now we'll turn to our clerk.
So Councillor Prost, through you, Deputy Warden, this is just the Special Budget Committee of the Whole report. So it's just approving the recommendation as sort of a cleanup procedural matter to approve the recommendations from the last meeting where the budget was just tabled. If you do have a conflict as it relates to GBGH funding, the appropriate time I would suggest would be during the Committee of the Whole, which is coming up next, under declaration of interest at that time. So we can certainly take your declaration, but I just suggest we wait until Committee of the Whole section, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. I just wasn't sure when.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything further, Council? All those in favor? And that has carried. Presentation and consideration of special committee reports, there are none. Presentations and consideration of county officer reports, there are none. Motion to which notice has been given are none. Notices of motion, there are none. Closed session is none. And consideration of bills, Councillor Norcross.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, moved by myself, second by Councillor Burkett, that bill number 710124 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe. Thank you.
Comments or questions? All those in favor? And that has carried. Our announcement, all staff and county council are invited to take part in an annual influenza program. The flu vaccines will be provided by Simcoe County paramedics for the community paramedics program and nurses from the county long-term care homes. The clinic will be hosted at the Oro Medonte Boardroom on November 26th from 8:30 to 3 in the Administration Center. And that this is a reminder that the elections for the business section of chairs and vice chairs will be occurring at our next meeting on November 26th, which is a joint council and committee of the whole meeting. And confirmation bylaw back to, oh, if there's any other announcements, my apologies. Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Deputy Warden Coughlin. This is a thank you. We've started our supportive rapid rehousing project, and actually we'll be housing people this week, and it's providing wraparounds in-house services to support, in this particular case, 55 plus. And I wanted to thank staff for their efforts in that regard. We've had a lot of area resident communication process that we've undertaken that probably is a little bit more than normally has been done. And we're very appreciative of that because it's helped us with the welcoming part of the endeavor into the community. So just as I said, just a thank you out to staff for all their efforts in getting this going. It's something that we very needed. So thank you.
Are there any other announcements from the floor? Not seeing any. Now we'll turn to Councillor Norcross.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, moved by myself, second by Councillor Rawson, that Bill number 710224 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe. Thank you.
And all those in favor? And that has carried. And we will now turn to our adjournment. Excuse me, and I'll ask for a mover and seconder for this, please. Councillors Measure and McDonald, that the November 12th, 2024 meeting of County Council be adjourned at 9:12 a.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. And we'll just take a quick moment to have our city reps join us. I will now call upon the clerk to call our roll.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. So those in attendance at council remain, and as far as the city reps are concerned, we have regrets from the Aurelia councillors. Barrie Councillor Hamilton is absent. Barrie Councillor Nagusi, Barrie Mayor Nuttall, and Barrie Councillor Riepma are in attendance, and you have your quorum. Thanks, Deputy Warden.
Thank you. I will now call upon Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Moved by myself and seconded by alternate Councillor Broderick that the agenda for November 12th, 2024 meeting of Committee of the Whole be approved.
Comments or questions on this, Council? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We'll now move on to our disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor Proust.
I'd like to declare a conflict of interest for any funding pertaining to GBGH, as I'm an employee there, and I'll fill out the form. I have it here.
Thank you for that, and we will simply just pull the GBGH portion separate to allow you to vote on the rest of everything and
Thank
allow
you.
you to have that. And our presentations and delegations, there are none. And we are now moving on to our budget, and I will call on GM Wilcox at this time.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Good morning, Council. I just want to take a couple of minutes just to review the report that's before you following our day of review of the budget. What we've provided for you, there were a number of items that were discussed during the budget meeting, largely covered. The report does outline a number of areas where there was additional information that we felt was important to bring forward to you to clarify the situation around some of those items. And then at the very end of the report, I provided a summary of the various options that were considered during the budget and was presented in the summary slides of the budget presentation. So in the table, it outlined various rate increases from 3.5, 3.75, the 4% that's the proposed draft budget, and then a 4.5%, and showed what the operating balance would be for those various options, and also from a rate per $100,000 assessment, what the rate would be and what the change or the increase would be per 100,000 for should one of those options be chosen. So at this point in time, the budget is set at a proposed 4%. Of course, we're ready for any direction that you have and any other questions you have regarding the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, GM Wilcox. And before we do open up to the floor for discussion, I'll just have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, and then we will have discussion from there. Councilors Snell and Fowler. That item CCW 2024-304, dated November 12th, 2024, regarding the follow-up from special budget meeting be received, and that subject to deliberations in the affirmative, the proposed 2025 County of Simcoe budget with adjustments as generally outlined in this subject item be approved. I will now turn to the floor for comments and questions. Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I would like to provide a revised recommendation, not a revised recommendation, but I guess an additional recommendation onto the recommendation that's on the floor. And I provided a copy to the clerk if he could put it on the screen.
Thank you. And as our clerk is pulling that up, if you could just provide context.
Absolutely. Happy to provide some context. And by the way, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Sandy McDonald. And this is in regards with the 4 hires for the emergency management program. So since the October 8th report, and then also since the budget deliberations, I did take the opportunity not only to talk to my own CEMC and Deputy CEMC, but also those from a few of the municipalities in Simcoe County, but also across the province. And it's definitely a one-size-does-not-fit-all proposal when it comes to how emergencies are managed across the province. So my talking to my own CEMC, they're very happy with the coordination that's currently provided by the level of service we have at the county, but they don't require an extra body in order to provide training or in order to provide grant writing. And I understand this is not all about me and all about Innisfil. So the idea was that this be deferred to the 2026 budget, and that each of the 16 municipalities either say, yes, you know, we could use those extra resources, we really could use someone to help us with this, or no, we're good. And then if there's only 5 or 6, or even if there's a dozen municipalities that decide, yeah, that's something we really want, but then you only have to hire 3 instead of 4. But if we hire 4 and then there's only, say, 5 that take advantage of the bodies, then I think that we're over-resourced at that point. And this is an expensive resource. This is $469,000. and all of which, with the exception of a small amount of just to get onboarded, goes to the base budget. So it gets added year after year after year. It's not like a one-time cost. So I think it's worth taking the extra time and making sure that we're providing the services for those of us at the county who decide that is a service that we require, and not providing duplication for those of us who've already resourced those different applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dolan, and I'll turn to the floor. Comments. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I hear loud and clear what Councillor Dolan is saying. However, I can tell you that I've had conversation with my CMC as well, and this is a service that Wasaga Beach would absolutely welcome. I think this is also a service that the County of Simcoe as a whole should be welcoming. I don't think it's necessarily to add 4 people to take on all new projects either. I think that there is lots to be done that the current staff have been doing that they need help with here at the county, if I understand them correctly. You know, I don't think we need a year for some of our communities to make that decision. So I couldn't agree with what Councillor Doling's putting forth, with all due respect, but I could agree with then possibly saying let's hire 2 this year and then look to see if we need 2 more in future. So I would suggest that perhaps if we're going to look to reduce this, that we don't just cut it out completely for the year. I think that we maybe go halfway and then see how that's going. And if there's any further requirement, we can add it to 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rawson?
Thank you. I'll echo councillors have spoken previously. I know we looked at this in the town of Pantangashine in collaboration with the town of Midland. This, I know, in the north is an area that we were relying on the County of Simcoe's expertise and support to support us in this venture. So I support this, but I think it's a great proposal if we reduce this to 2, and then we can expand it as the program grows. So I know from my perspective in our communities north, we look forward to this and really lean on the expertise by the county.
Thank you. Councillor Measures?
Thank you very much, Deputy Warden, and I acknowledge my colleagues' comments, very good points. I was wondering if perhaps we could ask General Manager Sinclair to comment on the workload that's currently on the existing structure and how these 4 persons would be utilized if they were approved, and perhaps follow up, if you would, Jane, with how you feel it could work if there was only 2 added and rather than 4.
GM Sinclair?
Thank you for the question. The current status of our emergency management program, as you know, it's a department of 2 individuals, and the expectations of emergency certainly have grown over the last 20 plus years. And in particular, they've taken on some additional workload associated with the long-term care Act that requires additional requirements for emergency planning and emergency management for our long-term care homes. So our current staff do deliver training and partner regularly with the local municipalities and do provide some minimal support. They've attended, I think, 5 local emergency exercises this year. However, do not have the capacity to help with design, help with evaluation, more from an observation perspective. So to provide additional emergency management support would be an extreme challenge with the current resources that we have. In terms of the 4 full-time equivalents recommended in the report, it was based on providing, I think, 8 key areas of enhanced support, and that those 8 key areas actually were identified by your local CMCs through discussions throughout the year, and those discussions formulated into those 8 key areas. Looking at potentially moving forward with 50% of the enhancement is something that absolutely we could go back and look at introducing a certain level of enhancement. the challenge is, with 60 municipalities, it's a large geography, to provide that level of service in all key 8 areas by 2 individuals, the support is not going to be as extensive. And if there are disasters, or, for example, that impact more than one municipality, it will compromise our ability to actually assist. But 2 resources certainly are a significant addition to the current emergency management capacity, so we would be able to certainly deliver additional support. I would look to Mr. Durfee, who led the review and the consultations with the CMCs. He also did an environmental scan and talked to other municipalities, but I would ask Mr. Durfee to comment further on the ability to respond with 2 versus 4 if that were approved.
Thank you, GMC Claire, and through yourself, Chair. With the 2 people, so obviously that would give us a significant enhancement over what we're currently seeing, and we would be able to provide some increased support to the municipality. We would have to examine thoroughly, though, of those 8 supports, we would not be able to support all 8 areas for the municipality, so there would have to be discussion in terms of which areas were their priorities for us to focus on next year with that limited staff, and then if the additional staff come the year after, expanding further from there. So there would be some limitations on the service delivered if 2 staff were added, but it would still be significantly more than our current capabilities allow us to provide to the local municipalities.
Thank you for that. Following, Councillor
Yeah,
Bridges?
just to follow up, if I may. And GM Sinclair sort of mentioned it a little bit there about a mass disaster or a large event that could occur. Can I just get a clarification either from you, General Manager, or from Mr. Dunphy about our relationship with the Provincial Operations Center and whether they have any provincial resources that would be applied to us in the event of a large event that you're speaking that our staff could be doing?
GM Sinclair?
I will ask Mr. Durfee to comment. They do have a resource dedicated for our area that we liaise with, but in terms of resources on the ground, I'll look to Mr. Durfee.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, the Direct Provincial Emergency Operations Center resource is our local field officer. So we're part of what's known as Severance Sector, and we have 2 field officers as part of that sector. That includes the county of Simcoe. It also goes up to Muskoka and over to Peterborough as well. So there are 2 staff members from the province who would be able to come out and assist in a disaster. But part of this enhancement was meant to collaborate with them, so that way we can coordinate and sort of area group our municipalities, because even with those 2 staff, they can't support everyone if we're all operating individually.
Thank you for that. And I saw Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I do concur with Councillor Dolan, and one of the reasons that I have a bit of maybe need clarification for is going forward for fee for services ever thought of for putting that forward, and the other one was that RCCM, they didn't really know anything about it. They know that they had a meeting that came up very quickly in August, but a very quick turnaround to be able to do it. But I don't know how many were able to do it, because the ones that I've talked to outside of our own municipality did not engage. So that is one of the reasons that I would concur to push it forward, just so make sure that all CCMs that would go with another meeting to make sure that the majority were there. And maybe you could clarify, GM St. Clair. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. First, in terms of the user fee, there is no intent to apply any user fees. And I think there was some understanding of a user fee applied in Niagara region, and I may ask Mr. Durfee to speak to that. The region of Niagara does not apply any, they provide emergency management support to all their member municipalities. They do not apply any user fees. However, there were a collection of a number of local municipalities who, on their own, got together and developed an additional emergency management program, just shared with, I think there's 4 municipalities, but that is not part of the regional program, and there is no intent. In fact, the development of the proposal to County Council was done so to ensure knowing that all member municipalities cost share in this emergency program, that all 8 areas would be available to all 16 municipalities with the resources. So there's no intent to apply any user fees. In terms of the consultation, we're always happy to have further consultations. I can tell you in a little more detail, when Mr. Durfee started in January 2nd, he very early in his tenure began to meet with the CEMCs of each of the 16 municipalities, as well as the cities of Barrie and Aurelia, to introduce himself, and very early on in those discussions in the first quarter, started to ask the CEMCs, how are we doing with providing support? Is there additional support we can provide from our emergency management program? So that started the consultation process. There was a CEMC meeting, they have formal meetings where they all get together in May, where it was discussed in more detail. And at that point, from the consultations, those discussions with the individual CMCs, the 8 areas were proposed at that point in May and discussed. And not all CMCs attend the CMC forums. However, Mr. Durfee ensured that the reports, both reports, the report from June and the report from September, were circulated to all CMCs. He also did a very similar presentation to the CMCs at one of the forums. They met again in August as well, to your comment. Videotape the presentation and actually and the minutes and circulated. So every meeting that has been held with the CEMC forum, the minutes and reports, everything has been shared directly following to try and ensure that the communication was occurring. So that has been our format for CEMC's meetings. However, not as many meetings, not 100% of the CMCs, I think, attended each and every meeting. So that's the processes that occurred during the year to gather information and to formulate a proposal and then share the information with all of our CEMC, or all of your CEMCs. You're welcome.
Thank you for that. I have Councillors Leduc and then Sandu.
Thank you. I too support this decision to be moved to 2026. I think in the end, we've been dealing with the pandemic for a few years now. We've had some planning already. I would love to see the communities get together and actually work together and share in that planning role. I think it's incumbent upon us to actually work with our partners when it comes to an emergency management plan. When we declare an emergency, it opens up funding from the province. It opens up opportunities from the province to help support the emergency management system. So in the end, I see that this should be pushed to 2026, so we have a chance to actually look at other ways to do this without bringing in 4 new people. York Region has 6 on their system. They do have 6 emergency management people, but their population of 1.4 million. So it's a much different when they have 6 there, and we would match them. We have 2.3. If anything, I would say, yeah, let's move it up to 3 people, because it's 2.3 members in the budget that sit on this committee. So I would suggest if we're going to do anything, we move it up to 3 at the most for now. That gives us a 0.7 to bring in a third full time. But I think there's opportunities for us to share in these planning exercises. I look at it from when we do the accessibility committee. We have certain municipalities that are sitting on an accessibility committee at the county level. And that to me is the same thing. It could be done the same way where we share in these CMC or CEMC management systems. We share, we talked in Innisfil many times, we talked in Newtek many times when it comes to these services. We all have mutual aid packages. So it's not that we wouldn't lean on our neighbors, we certainly would lean on our neighbors, and the county is a support-only system. So to me, it's a little bit early. I know they've had a meeting, we talked to our CMC. They weren't quite fully aware, they just knew that the report came and it was supported by council, that's what they were told. So to me, I would like to move this to 2026. I think it's a year where we're having a tough time with our budget. So I'd like to see this stay and move to 2026. And I think we have other areas that we could look at to share in these planning services throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sandu.
Thank you. I also support this recommendation. when I read in the report that the other municipalities or EMCs were consulted, and what I hear on the ground is totally different, that concerns me. And we heard a comment today too, we were consulted, but then it was just a part of a meeting that it was mentioned. To me, that's not consultation. If we want to be equal partners in everything, then proper consultation has to be done. I checked with our coordinator. They did not know till we brought this up from the last meeting we had, and our CAO did not know. And that's concerning to me. I support this as a program. I think it's very important that when the emergency happens, regardless of the boundaries, we all need to come together and help. But at the end of the day, like Councillor Duke mentioned, York Region at that level has the same what we're asking where we are with our population. I can't support 4. Right now, I support that recommendation that's in front of us.
Councillor Locks?
Thank you, through the chair. We've had fruitful discussions with Councillor Dolan about this and Councillor Leduc, and I can support this either fully or partially. I just got a quick question that may resolve the situation with the email or the report that came out. If GM Cox could possibly, or Trevor, sorry, GM Wilcox, if he could chime in on speaking about, you have the proposed options of a plus 0.5% levy or a minus 0.5. With the minus 0.5, would that include any of this situation? So that if we're all looking for a cheaper budget here, we can possibly resolve this situation before we sit here and talk for 20 or 30 more minutes about whether we like this amendment or not.
GM Wilcox?
Thank you, through the chair. So what I outlined in your package was various different levels of levy with the flow-through impact to the operating balance and what that would mean. This would be a change. Should we decide to go forward this, there could be a reduction in cost. Then that would be up to council to decide whether that gets applied to reduce the levy or not. If it doesn't, then we flow it through the operating balance, and we have a higher operating balance, which we use towards capital. So it strengthens our financial position. In terms of this specific item, the full amount is worth approximately 2%, 0.2%. So half of that would be 0.1 if that was applied towards the levy. So hopefully that clarifies. Thank you.
Follow on?
Sort of, kind of. Thank you. No, I was more looking to the fact of, I believe everybody here is looking to reduce the budget from what I've been speaking with, and I just didn't want this to be only the focal point. If we can reduce the budget to 3.5 with fully having this amendment or partially having this amendment, if we could speak out that way and say we can go ahead and get 3.5 and keep everybody happy, I'd love to go down that approach.
Sorry. GM Wilcox?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Through the chair. So what is in your package right now includes this. This has not been touched within the budget. All those numbers within the table, the 3.5, 3 3/4, 4, etc., all includes this within the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Council, before us, we have a recommendation, an amendment. I can speak into my mic, sorry. We have an amendment put forward by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor McDonald. And then I did hear from Councillors Smith and Rawson that there would be an amendment to the amendment. So that is the path that the clerk would like us to take to keep this neat and tidy and carry on with it. So if there is that amendment to the amendment, I will turn to our clerk.
Through you, Deputy Warden, I'll just maybe turn to the members that the Deputy Warden mentioned. That is an option here if there is desire of some councillors, and it's duly moved and seconded, that this amendment be amended to go to, basically change 4 to 2 and we'd reflect the updated cost of $234,500. So you could make an amendment to that effect, and we could have that voted on. And depending on what happens with that, we would come back to this amendment as is or as amended.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk, and I would be in agreement with that. I think it's incumbent upon me to say that, you know, when we look at our budget here, we have a lot of items, and there are a lot of things on this budget that many of us could consider to be not as important as others. And many of those items are a lot bigger dollar value than this. I won't mention any specifics, but there are a few I just shake my head at, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, this is one of these services that, you know, it's like the brakes on your car. You may let them chug away and you may let them pulsate because you think it'll take another day, but when the time comes and you need those brakes, you're going to wish the hell you had them. And I would say that when the time comes that we need this service here in the county of Simcoe, we're going to wish like crazy that we had the people that were required to be there to back us up. And I can tell you that for my municipality, and I'm hearing from other colleagues here, we rely on the county of Simcoe and this team a great deal when it comes to emergency management. So I would absolutely be supportive of saying let's go to 2 instead of 4 and see how that goes. I support it as it is currently in the budget. I cannot support what I see there. So those are my points. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I look to Councillor Rawson for the second on that.
I do.
Thank you. Our clerk's going to bring up the amendment to the amendment. Really happy that the warden is way on this meeting. GM Wilcox is just mentioning that rather than putting a dollar amount associated to it, it would simply be 2 employees because they don't know the actual with that. So it'll just read that it'll be reducing it rather than getting rid of 4, it'll be reducing to 2. So council, we do have the amendment to the amendment on the floor. Oh, Councillor Rawson.
The date would need to change to 2025.
So our clerk is suggesting that 2 be deferred, 2 of the positions be deferred to 2026, so that the other ones in the 2025 budget be approved as is. So before us, council, we have an amendment to the amendment. Are there any further questions on this being reduced from 4 to 2? Councillor Snell.
Thank you, through the chair. There's obviously some different information coming in regards to municipalities being consulted. I know in Mississauga Beach, we had a lengthy conversation about this, and it was brought forward to us in advance of it even coming to county because it was supported. Do you know specifically, we've got 60 municipalities and 2 separated cities. Can you give a definitive number in terms of which municipalities identified that they would need this service? Do we know that at this time, please?
GM Sinclair?
I'm going to ask Mr. Durfee, because he actually spoke to all 16 CMCs during the course of the year, in addition to these formal forums where they all come together. So I will look to Mr. Durfee if he is able to quantify of the 16 CMCs that you were engaged in consultations and discussions. Can you quantify the number that expressed they were looking for additional support?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. As was mentioned earlier, not every municipality specifically mentioned all 8 areas, but all municipalities did express some support was wanted in one way or another. I don't have a specific number for which municipality said exactly which area handy, but in some regards or another, every CMC we spoke to did mention some support would be needed, and none of them raised any questions or concerns regarding the 8 areas we identified.
Follow on?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that information. Hearing that, I would definitely support reducing it to 2, but definitely including still 2. Thank you.
Council, I'm not seeing any further hands, so for clarification, we are voting to have this amendment basically cut in half, so we're on the amendment. Oh, I have another hand. Sorry, Councillor Leduc.
Deputy Warden, I just want to clarify, because in the budget, it talks about 2.3 people being involved in this at this level, the Emergency Management Committee already. We have 2.3 people. If you look in your budget book on page 39, I think it is, it allocates 2.3. Would we be okay if we said, let's up that 0.3 to a full 1 and 1 more? So that would be 1.7 instead of the full 2. Because you would gain 2 full positions in the end. We only have a 0.3, so I don't know what the 0.3 adds up to be, but you would gain 2 full positions. So you'd have 4 full-time people doing this. Would that be something that the amenders would be okay with, going to 1, just to filling it out to have 4 people? Because I don't know what the 0.3 does then. I have no idea what the 0.3, Jim Sinclair can.
And thank you for that. And Councillor Leduc, I already have 2 amendments on the floor, so we will deal with them appropriate, but I will have CM Sinclair speak to that. But I did see that the mover and seconder want to stick to their 2, and we'll go from there. So GM Sinclair.
Just for clarity, I'll ask Mr. Durfee to outline the current resources. Through to you, Mr. Durfee.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So the current department, it is the 2.3 as noted by Councillor Duke. So there's my own position as the manager of the department. We have a full-time training and promotions coordinator, and then that 0.3 is our summer student. So they come in the summer. They're a student in a disaster and emergency management program at a university and provide us with some extra work in the summer, normally research around hazards, risk identification, and CI research, but that 0.3 is a student position.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Leduc.
So the student position, is it funded from provincial funding as a student funding, or is it funded by this budget?
Through you, Chair, it is funded through the county, not through provincial funding.
Thank you. Council, we do have the amendment on the floor, and I will be calling the vote on the amendment. So this is to move, as it's highlighted here, to have 2 positions be deferred to the 2026 budget, which would allow 2 positions to move forward today. Council, all those in favor of the amendment? The amendment to the amendment. And those opposed? And that carries. So we're going back to our amendment as amended. So back again, so we're voting again to have the positions, 2 positions moved to 2026. So essentially the same vote all over again. Seeing nothing further on that, Council, all those in favor? And those opposed? And that carries. And the clerk is going to bring up our main motion as amendment, and we will go back for further discussion. And I can turn now to have conversation, comments on different areas, different discussions. Anything? Councillor Leduc?
We've got, sorry, Councillor Anderson was.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Just going back to GM Wilcoxon on this item here. So in your table, you do have a 3.75 and a 3.5 option. And so I understand this is just a change in the operating balance. So if county council was looking to reduce the budget, then we could just pick one of those and staff would be able to make those adjustments without any service cuts. Is that what I understand?
GM Wilcox?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Yes, that would be what I'm suggesting. We've got the full budget incorporated in those. What it shows is the impact to the operating balance should those items be picked. Absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor Leduc?
Yeah, so I'd like to put an amendment on the floor that council support a 3.5% tax levy increase for this year for 2025.
Councillor Fryer? Councillor Fryer is seconding that. So we can have discussion on it. So we now have an amendment before us for the 3.5, and I will turn to Councillor Cox.
Just for clarification through the chair to Manager Wilcox, you have here the highlighted green area with the, will that be included in the 3.5?
GM Wilcox?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, yes, all of those items, those figures show the adjustments that were done for changes related to solid waste management contract and compensation adjustments. So those are the new updated numbers. So should you pick a 3.5% adjustment, then that would include the full budget the way it is, with one small tweak. So with the amendment here, there is approximate reduction of about $200,000. So that will increase the operating balance on all of those figures, approximately $200,000. So that would change it a little bit up, which is good. Thank you. Hopefully that works.
Thank you.
Councillor looking for any further, sorry, Councillor Leduc.
Yeah, just to speak, when looking at this, it made it clear that we could do a 3.5 without impacting any of our services, and I think that's what the goal of council here today should be, is that we still provide all the services we require for our residents in Simcoe County. So to me, I want to thank Trevor and Leland for bringing this forward to us and bringing that opportunity for us to council get that to a 3.5. It's a $1 million reduction, which he's found within the budget to do that, so without impacting any of our services. So to me, I'm in full favor of the 3.5%. It makes for a tidy budget. Thank you.
Anything further, Council? GM Wilcox?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to be clear, the reason why I've laid out the dollars where we were and where we landed on originally for the 4% was to try and provide an operating balance that would provide more support towards the capital program that we have and the future capital program that we've committed to. So yes, we can do all of the services without impacting them with that specific budget, with any of those lines. So that's why we've given you the 3.5 all the way up to a 4.5. I was trying to encourage a little bit larger increase to reflect that. I understand the desire for a rate that is a little bit lower. So that's why the options were laid out there. So, you know, as your financial chief within the county, I would be remiss if I didn't advocate for as large an increase as you feel is appropriate, because that is going to help us the most in the future. As I laid out previously, we've had years with much lower than inflationary increases. That has put a lot of pressure on the financials within the county. And if to the degree that we don't have an increase that's a little bit higher, I'll probably be coming back to you at some point in the future. But I understand where council is sitting. I just wanted to reiterate kind of where we were coming from in terms of that recommendation. That's why I kind of, when we were looking at the reductions and the adjustments that we had, I put out the 3.75 because it got us back to around where we were at originally with the budget in terms of an operating balance. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Wilcox. Yes, Councillor Bois.
Yes, thank you very much. I do support going to 3.5%, and I think many of us are challenged in our own township budgets at the moment, and perhaps, thank you very much, GM Wilcox, for your comments, and maybe if we have to reconsider this budget at a later time, I think that's appropriate as well. But right now, I think we're headed into troubled waters. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So Council, we do have the amendment. Oh, sorry, Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate your comments, General Manager Wilcox, and I can appreciate Councillor Leduc's suggestion in wanting to reduce our budget, as we're all looking to do it in the our own municipalities. But when you look at some of the capital commitments that we've made, we've got $186 million at Rose Street, $5 million asked from the YMCA, 11.6 to the museum expansion. These are significant projects, plus our long-term care. I don't think we can skinny that piece because we know what's coming at us. And when you look at the services, the essential services that the county provides to all of our municipalities in support of homelessness and affordable housing and all of those social pieces that are way beyond our scope, I don't think this is a place that we can trim fat, in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Appreciate the opportunity. To further muddy the waters, I'll just put my 2 cents worth in. I'm in favor of the 3.75, and the reason is this. The operating financial health of the company is keeping it at 3.75 will be maintained. At 3.75, our operating balance stays the same. And at this point in time, I realize that increases are not popular anywhere, and we're going to have to deal with it. But if we're going to harm the organization by going from 3.75 to 3.5, I don't want to do it. I don't want to. Our objective here is long-term health of this corporation and make sure that it sustains services for our community. And we do have a lot of capital projects moving forward. And as you well know, putting capital projects over to another year doesn't make them cheaper. It just gets more and more expensive. So I'm in favor of the 3.75. Keeps the company whole, keeps it integral, keeps it financially sound, and keeps us moving forward. And at the same time, I think is fiscally prudent. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cox?
I have to concur with with what GM Wilcox said. I don't want to harm our organization for the future. It's happened before, and we pay for this in the end. We have to keep up because we do have things that need to be done. I agree with Councillor Snell and I agree with Councillor Evans. So I could either do a 3.75 or a 4, but I cannot do a 3.5. I believe I probably should be listening to what GM Wilcox says. He is our financial advisor. He is the man who looks after the money, and so is Liam. And so I won't be able to support a 3.5 or 3.75. The difference in the revised rate per 100,000 assessment is $2 from a 3.5 to a 4. And I just want to make sure that the county's looked after. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Leduc?
So just to speak on the financial of the corporation, this is the operating side. We're talking $500,000 out of the operating side, not the capital. They take some of the operating, the overrun, the surplus of the operating, they put it back in the capital budget, which is great planning. But we're talking $500,000 from a 3.5 to 3.75. So that's not going to bankrupt this corporation. It's not going to hurt our corporation. It's the operating side. So we're going to find efficiencies within the operating side. And I think GM Wilcox has done a great job of doing that. I will say that this council has done a great job at actually installing asset management into our budget system. We just started that. That program has been running in Bradford now since 2013. It's an absolute perfect thing to do. I support the asset management side, which supports the capital. That's what we need to do, and I think it's a great thing. So the 2% we have built into this budget right now is perfect, and I think if we carry on with that, we will see this corporation get stronger, and we will make sure financially down the road that we've done the right thing for future councils. But today, 3.5 is not a large difference when it's 500,000 on the operating side. So it's just about finding some efficiencies through operations. We're not hurting the capital side. So I would support 3.5% budget increase. Thank you.
Thank you. And so council, in order to move this along, I did have this, much like we just did on the last one. So what we'll do is we'll have the amendment put forward to our amendment. So we will have moved by Councillor Evans, and seconded by Councillor Cox. Not for the, no, you went the 4. For the 3.75. And I have the Councillor Prowse. So we will be dealing with this in this fashion. So we will have the 3.75 amendment to the amendment? If that's what the intent of Councillor Evans, and the seconder is Councillor Prowse. Prowse? So council, before us is to reduce from 4 to 3.75, and if that is supported, it would be the main, Councillor Cox.
Sorry, is that a problem if the GBHD is in there? I just want to protect the councillor.
Thank you, and I will turn to our clerk.
This is an amendment to the main motion. The main motion does have the Georgian Bay General Hospital outside of the main motion. So Councillor Prowse, with her conflict, can certainly vote on this.
Thank you for that. Councillor, is there any questions on the amendment to the amendment? So from 4 to 3.75 is before us. Not seeing anything further. Council, all those in favor? And opposed? And that has been defeated. So we are back to the main amendment. So that is to now have it reduced from 4% to 3.5%. So council, we are now voting to have reduce our levy increase from 4 to 3.5. Any further comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Gonna need them a little higher. I didn't bring my glasses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yep. And all those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. And that has been defeated. Defeated. We can do that again. All those opposed again, and we'll have a count. And it is a tie, so it is defeated. So we have the main motion. Oh, my apologies, Count. Yes.
Is it an appropriate time to speak to the capital side of the budget as well?
We are now back to the main motion, so yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I have a few questions for staff, and I want to apologize I didn't get them in advance to you to be able to noodle, and that's on me. So if it takes a couple of moments to be able to get the answers back, then I'm totally fine with that. My understanding is when there's capital items that fall within the purview that the City of Barrie is part of, that there is an agreement that exists between the county and the city whereby the capital projects, essentially, the City of Barrie funds them over a 10-year period, and that was put in place to stop the spikes of, 1 year you've got a $30 million ask, and the next year you've got 0, and the year after that, so on and so forth, which I completely understand and agree with. My question is, when it comes to, let's say, the building in Aurelia for affordable housing, et cetera, the capital contribution to that, how is that estimated?
GM Wilcox?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Through you, so the question is, how is the total capital estimated, or how is the allocation estimated?
How is the capital pull from the city of Barrie estimated? So if the total cost is $200 million or something like that, the city of Barrie's portion is 40 to 50 million, depending on whether, whatever the balance is that year that we make up of the total county.
Yeah.
And then, so that would be, let's just use round numbers. So let's just say it's 50 million at that point and it's 25%. So is then that 50 million then calculated into a 10-year pull, and 5 million a year comes from the city of Barrie into this capital reserve and in the county and moves forward? Is that how it's done?
Through the chair, yes. Essentially, it's and the number is for social housing. It's about 25% allocation based upon the shared services agreement. So any what we call major facility capital, so the larger capital items, not vehicles, not smaller things, they're pulled together into a pool, and we each year, and we calculate a 10-year payback for that. So that and that amount is funded by the county, and then we allocate that through the next 10 years, and that's what's added on each year to the capital program.
Okay, and so when the county looks at debentures and they go and issue debt for Aurelia in this case, what is the standard policy for the county in terms of your debt ceiling, and what percentage of the capital works will be debt?
We will assess each situation individually. At this point in time, with the way the capital is handled, the cities have responsibility for their portion of the capital, so that would never be debentured. The county would debenture its own debt or its own portion of the capital, and it would be up to this House to decide. I would bring a recommendation forward in terms of the debenture, and then it would have to be approved here.
So I'm going to ask members of council to hear this, because I know there's a lot going on, and I know that we're missing some leadership in meeting in Oro today. But what you just heard was that the city of Aurelia and the city of Barrie pay for these projects over 10 years, but the rest of you pay for them over the life of a debenture, which could be 25 years, could be 30 years. I think we've even done debentures in the 50-year realm in the city of Barrie. I don't know if that's happening out here or not. And so every time there's a capital pull on the city of Barrie, our amortization period is 10 years, and your amortization period is whatever the debenture states. Meaning that when a project happens, the city of Barrie and the city of Aurelia, and it's unfortunate the city of Aurelia is not here today, are overcompensating the builds of the capital projects for the areas in which we are, we're responsible, we're demanded to pay. And if you were to take, and I could have done this work, and I can do this work if needed, but if you were to take that and you were to look at what the impact is in terms of the financing, essentially what's happening is you're taking the dollars from the two cities, which then are kind of like your down payment on your house, if you will, and then you're using the ability for the county to then leverage it over the longer period of time. So it's the cities that are pushing more money in up front. And I don't know if this is a thing that we can deal with today, because I just heard this debate prior with regards to, the capital. But if the true cost of it was being allocated equally across the county municipalities and the cities, your capital pull on your own resources would be much more significant up front. There is an active subsidization program from the cities to the county that's taking place. And I only uncovered that because I started asking a lot of questions to my own staff about how we are doing it over 10 years, but debenture money is going much longer, so how are we participating inside of those debentures, which I was told that we're not. And I see a real issue with that because I think it's pretty fundamental to the capital plan that's being approved. And I think it'll be pretty fundamental to the capital plan going forward and all of your 10-year plans, 5-year plans, all of that. So I'm raising it today. I know that this is a negotiation year between the City of Barrie and the County of Simcoe. I think it's something that there's open to be a negotiation on. But as far as I can see, it doesn't ring very fair at the moment.
Thank you. I see Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I hear the Mayor of Barrie quite clearly, and so I would suggest then, if that's the case and that's the concern, that perhaps that we should be, it's high time that we do a fulsome look into the separated cities and how our services work with respect to the separated cities, because I would argue that the county on the whole subsidizes, in my opinion, the separated cities. We receive no DCs, no taxes, unless it's something that the separated cities are wanting the service for, such as paramedic services, for example. So I hear exactly what Mayor Nuttall is saying and what he's talking about. I don't agree, but I do agree that we need to have a real good look at this, because at the end of the day, save and except for the agreement between the county and the separated cities, which was agreed to by some councils somewhere down the road, so if they want to look at that again, that's fine. But I think that, the fact that this is coming to light here today means it's high time that we start to look at all services and that agreement and exactly who is subsidizing who. Thank you.
Before I go back to Nuttall, I did see GM Wilcox.
Thank you, through the chair. The governing way that capital and operating costs for the shared services are allocated is based upon the shared services agreement. It is inappropriate to characterize that as some kind of deposit or funding mechanism that the county is taking advantage of the cities in using. The agreement that was in place prior to that was the allocation of the capital.
Point of order. Sorry, GM Wilcox.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Point of order and
yeah, the point of
person?
personal privilege is it would be uncharacteristic of the debate that would happen in the City of Barrie for a member of staff to comment on the appropriateness or inappropriateness of a member of committee or council to say something in the meeting.
Member Nuttall, I have heard that, but I'm going to allow GM Wilcox to continue, and your point has been taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So what I'd just like to point out is that the allocation methodology was set up, and prior to this was all capital, all OPEX was allocated specifically based upon the shared services agreement, because the members of the agreement wanted to be able to control their piece in their appropriate way. So it would be up to each member to decide how they wanted to deal with those components. So if there were DCs applied, if there are other funding mechanisms, or if you wanted to borrow for that component, you could. There was agreement in the last shared services agreement. We changed that because there was desire by the cities, both Aurelia and Barrie wanted to try and smooth out the capital, and we agreed to do that so that it would help to smooth that capital out. There has even been suggestion that was put forward by the county in the recent analysis to actually look at that smoothing further in terms of looking at maybe that would be appropriate over the life of the asset. So there is mechanisms that we were looking at. We were looking at potentially putting that in place. And that would be appropriate under the shared services agreement. I don't feel it really affects the budget per se, because the budget is set based upon the whole program and the whole program that needs to be done for the county as a whole. The shared services then will, the agreement itself then will deal with the allocation of that program to the cities appropriately as based upon an allocation methodology like weighted taxable assessment or cases, et cetera. Thank you.
Councillor Dolan?
Oh, sorry, I think Mayor
Follow
Nuttall.
on, Mayor Nuttall?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I certainly welcome...
Point of privilege to those in the House. I'm not a clerk.
Sorry, Madam Deputy Warden, I apologize. The point that was made over, I don't know who said it, with regards to looking at the subsidization of either the cities or from the cities to the cities, et cetera, I think is a welcome one. And I think that if the members of the committee would like to go down that road, they would have the support from members of the city of Barrie to do so, because it's not really an opinion piece. It's math, and at the end of the day, the numbers will bear what they bear, and that will determine where things actually lie. And so I don't think that there's a big battle to be had on getting information as to how the dollars are being spent or not spent and who's receiving too much where and not enough there. And I'll give you a very quick example. If you go to, it might be actually have changed this year specifically, but if you go to long-term care, for years, the city of Barrie was being charged for 12 beds. I think we had 2 individuals in beds for the majority of those years, and none of the beds were in the city of Barrie. But then when you go over to, let's say, social services, it's a completely different picture. So the accounting and audit of that will tell a fulsome story.
Thank you. Councillor Dolan?
Thank you very much, Deputy Warden. My understanding is that the City of Barrie did a value for services review and that it's coming to the City of Barrie Council tomorrow evening. So perhaps we could table this conversation until after that conversation happens at the City of Barrie Council table.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
I would agree with Councillor Dolan, but I think at this time, I think this is a premature conversation. There's an agreement in place. We're following the agreement. Until that expires, there's nothing to discuss. I think this is something you bring up during negotiation, bring it to the House, and the House will decide at that time.
I have GM Wilcox and then Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let you know the shared services agreement that is in place expired last year. However, there is language within the agreement that says that it continues until we've got a renewed agreement. The cities requested at that time that we defer changing the agreement until the value for services audit was completed. So we've deferred actually negotiating or starting to discuss changes to the agreement until that was done. So that was to accommodate that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Nuttall?
Yeah, I think that there's a bit of a confusion here because we're now bringing in kind of the operating side and the capital side into one. The request specifically, or the issue that arose through this audit, was on the capital side for us. So the information that we've received back, you can go look at it, it's in an agenda, is that there is good value for money. So it doesn't say, it doesn't go and look and go, okay, are there other ways to run programs that are more, that's not what it does. What it does is it goes and says, okay, the city of Barrie and the county as a whole are funding this, and let's call it a shelter program at this point. Is there value for money in the way that the county is funding that program and executing on that? And that's the information that we've been getting back. But when you step back from the actual operations and you go to the capital pulls, and Mr. Wilcox is quite right. This is actually an improvement on the previous year up, year down, not knowing what's happening, unable to plan it out from the city's perspectives. When you take into consideration that if we were doing in any other world, if we were partnering, because that's what we are in these services, if we were partnering on a project, the reality is I'd put in my portion, you'd put in your portion, and it would be netted out prior to going and getting debt to help build the rest of the building. That's just not what's happening here. What's happening here is I put in my portion, which is 1/10 of what my total request is, and the city of Orillia, I believe, does the same thing. And then the county puts in whatever's necessary on the balance to get there, but we are then paying the rest of our, let's call it 10 years or 9 years out, and you're paying your 35 years or 30 years out. And so the actual, there is an actual way to determine what the over contributions are to this from the cities versus the county. And if the will of this council is that it just be left to the negotiations of the overall agreement, I'm totally good with that. But you're in a capital and operating planning model of your budget right now, and all I'm doing is highlighting it to say this is an issue that's coming down the road.
Councillor Fryer?
Thank you, Deputy Warden Coughlin, and through you to General Manager Wilcox, because I just want to make sure I'm clear about this. The agreement was put in place at some point in time, and agreement between the cities and county about the 10-year phasing. And if I understand correctly, now the agreement's underway for renewal because the value for money audit has come in, and we will start to undergo the process of renewing the agreement. And if I heard also correctly, internally there'd already been discussion about the appropriateness of the 10-year as opposed to life of asset or that type of thing. So that's going to be part of the consideration on a go-forward basis, and it was already planned to be, right?
GM Wilcox?
Thank you very much, through the chair. Yes, that is correct. So the agreement itself will renew. Ideally, we'll negotiate that this year coming forward. And yes, there was a proposal that was put forward that was analyzed by the consultants in the value for service audit as well, for something very similar to what Mayor Nuttall is speaking to, which is to look at the life of the asset and how we may change that in terms of the allocation to the cities related to that, so that smooths it out even more. So that was already in discussion, but we were waiting until the value for service audit was completed. Thank you.
follow-on?
Just as a follow-up of MA, and that makes sense, right? You put together an agreement and it puts together the phase-in for 10 years, and you take another look at that. So I'm pleased to hear that that's progressing the way it is. It sounds to me like it's generally the feeling of what everybody here wants to see happen too. So thank you.
Thank you. And in agreeance. And before we do carry on, there is a request to have a brief break before we come back to the main motion, and I do believe that there is a additional amendment to be placed. So before we start doing more amendments, we will just take a quick break. If we can return in 10 minutes, please. Thank you, Council, and we are live again. We do have the main motion as on the screen, and at this time, we'll be looking for any further amendments or comments. Councillor Dolan?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I would like to provide an amendment for the increase for 2025 to be 3.625 increase. And I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Fowler. If I could just explain. So from this vantage point, I can see all the cards, and somebody wanted, half the House wanted 3.5, the other half voted against it. The other half of the House wanted 3.75. The 3.5 group voted against it, so I cut it right down the middle. 3.625, and looking for support for that. Thank you.
Compromise in politics. We don't see that very often. So we do have an amendment, Council, here before us. I did see Councillor Smith's card, and is that comment on the amendment or the main motion?
Actually, it was just another comment with respect to the conversation we were having right before we left, and some clarification and requests.
Thank you. And if we can deal with the main, the motion as before us, or the amendment before us, and I will come back to you after that for comment.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Clerk, or sorry, Madam
Clerk.
My apologies, Madam Deputy Warden.
And there's nothing wrong with being a clerk, and I mean no offense when I said that, but we do have an amendment before us, which has been moved and seconded, and we do have it up on the screen, so that the proposed 2025 County of Simcoe budget be amended to reduce the increase from 4 to 3.625. Anything further on that? Council, all those in favor, and I'm going to ask, as we cannot have recorded votes, I'm just going to ask for green cards or hands high. Thank you. And those opposed? And that carries. Thank you for the amendment. So we will return back to our main motion, and I do have comment from Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Warden. Just with respect to the last conversation before we took the break, I just want to be clear on a couple of things, and I know that it will come back to this council. The agreement being worked on currently with the separated cities, I just want to confirm that that will come back to this council before anything is ratified there. But before it does, I'd like to ask that we have a fulsome and very complete report, whether it be by staff or if we think we need to go outside of that. I would like to know, or this House to be able to know, what percentage of our assets lie within the separated cities, and what percentage of services that are offered by the county versus the rest of the county for separated cities versus the balance. I think that's very important, because if we're talking about subsidizing, that's the topic that seems to have been brought to the table here, then I think we really need to have a clear understanding of that as a council on a whole. And we can argue whether it's a capital issue or an operational issue, but at the end of the day, dollars are dollars. And if we want to be sure that the separated cities are being treated fairly, as is the rest of the county and our other municipalities, then I think it's vitally important that we have those numbers.
Thank you. And before I do turn to GM will square any comment on that, I think that if we can keep the conversation to the budget today and maybe have a motion following the budget, because I do believe that everyone on this floor is very interested in participating in that discussion, and I do believe that it is a very important discussion. And I think that if we can have that after the budget as a notice of motion or a motion, it can be part of the budget, a separate motion as part of the budget. GM Wilcox?
Thank you, through the chair. Certainly, Councillor, we will be bringing back any changes to the shared services agreement would come with a fulsome report to Council. We can take your direction as you described and include that in that report, or we could do a separate report if whatever the House directs. Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Warden. I think it's important. Perhaps we should do that in a separate report, so as that there is clarity and there is no muddy water, if you will, around this. I think it's vitally important, as I said, and we need to have that information in order to make a proper, sound decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So council, before us, we have our main motion, which has been amended. Is there anything further, comments or questions? Not seeing any at this time, so I do have it moved by Councillor Snell and seconded by Councillor Fowler, and I look to see that there's still time with that. So council, that the proposed 2025 County of Simcoe budget, with the exclusion of any related funding to Georgian Bay General Hospital, be approved with the following amendments. Update operating balance figures as outlined within item CCW 2024-304 dated November 12, 2024. Defer 2 program supervisor positions in emergency management to the 2026 budget deliberation pending further consultation with local municipalities, and reduce the increase from 4% to the compromised 3.625. Council, all those in favor? And that has carried. And we're now looking for a mover and seconder for the Georgian Bay General Hospital portion of the budget. And I have Councillors Measures and Evans. That any related funding to Georgian Bay General Hospital included in the 2025 County of Simcoe budget be approved. And we do have a declaration on this. Anything further on this, Council? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. And at this time, I'll ask our, Vice Chair McDonald to come to the podium. And I will now turn to Councillor Smith to put forward, I believe there was a motion, and I'll look for a seconder for that. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Warden. I would put forth a motion that there be clarity around, very clear clarity around all services and all assets within the separated cities versus the balance of the County of Simcoe. And from a percentage standpoint, and I would like that on any and all services and or any and all assets.
And our clerk is moving, or going to put something on the screen here, and I'll just turn to our GM Wilcox if there's anything. And there was a, sorry, Councillor Bell for the seconder on that. GM Wilcox?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to say that the services that we provide and the shared services are regional, whole services. We treat them as a system. It's a system that's we've put in place to provide whether it's social services, health services such as paramedic services, and we manage those services on a system level where we don't recognize borders. So if it's appropriate to put that service within or without one municipality, the cities or not, we look at it from a whole perspective. So we can provide where those services are, but that's just to be clear, that's not how they're managed. So they're managed that way, and that's why the shared services agreement then is a way of allocating those costs between us and the separated cities, because we've got the mandate to provide those services across the county, and we provided a way of, we feel, that fairly represents what those partners would contribute to providing those services. The benefit is that even if a service is provided in one municipality versus another, it benefits the entire region. So that's why we look at it that way. So we can provide future, certainly where those services are and how those are situated, but I just want to make sure that council is aware that we manage this as an entire service across the county as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk, and thank you, General Manager Wilcox, for that. No doubt in my mind that we manage these services in the fairest and best way possible. I have all the respect in the world and the confidence in the staff here and how we do this. What I think is important, however, for this council to know is what those percentages are. I know that we're going to continue to manage it in a fair and equitable manner, but I think the questions raised here today warrant us knowing those percentages and knowing what levels and what, sorry, not levels, but what services and what assets our separated cities benefit from versus the rest of the county with respect to assets and services. I can tell you that I understand fully that, you know, we look at services and where the greater need is, but it only stands to reason that the greater need in this case would be in the largest city within the county, has the highest population. And clearly, I would say that that's where we have put a good majority of our assets and our services. And there's a cost to that. And there's a cost to that for every municipality within the county, and there's a cost to that for the separated cities that benefit from that. I would argue that for them to have those services on their own would be very difficult, if at all possible. So I think it's highly important, I just can't stress this enough, that this council get that information. Thank you.
Thank you. And just clarification that the wording before us is that you're comfortable with that it captures your intent.
Yes, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Nuttall, and then Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, I think there's one thing that's missing there, which is also the participation, the origin of the participants. For instance, if there was a building in Aurelia that's going up and now mostly operational, and those participants are coming 90% from Aurelia and 10% from the surrounding rural municipalities, that I think would provide a lot of information and light on the subject. But if they were coming 90% from around and 10% from Aurelia, then it would also create some questions. And so more than just when you're looking at the asset and service mix, you also have to look at the origin of the individual. And I know in the city of Barrie, for instance, the origin of many individuals who are living homeless, it's not a county issue, it's not a city issue, it's like an Ontario and in many times Canadian issue, because the origin is from far outside.
Thank you. General Manager?
Through you, Deputy Warden. Just to, at least for social services, we have to just flag a couple of things. There's provincial and federal legislation that govern how the services are delivered, and there's human rights codes that do as well. So in terms of asking someone of where their origin is from, that's protected and isn't done that way, and it's not in either on the wait list legislation nor on the federal programs. So I just want to be clear, while we make every effort to make services available to those in need where they're at, and then it's obvious, it's often, if not all the time, voluntarily up to them to engage in those services. So we can offer through a system approach beds or units or rent subsidies or all the social services we do across the county. But more often than not, someone chooses to engage or use that service where it's most convenient to them. And that we can't change or force. We have no authority to do that. And the legislation, in fact, tells us we cannot do that. So I just want to be flagging for you. So while the numbers may reflect something, It is funded as a system provincially and federally. It's legislated that way. The Human Rights Code, as it stands right now, protects it that way for those users. I just want to, like, so that there isn't a misconception of looking at a number and saying, well, if 90% are from this city, and the from is very hard to define because everyone objectively thinks they're from a place depending on where they live and maybe not where they grew up. So that being said, that's not going to reflect how we invest our funding because we're told to invest it in a specific way. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon?
Thanks. That's a good point. I mean, I wanted to speak to this systems approach. Midland feels this. You know, we've earned the the number 3 rank for homelessness in Simcoe County, and we've all been scratching our heads wondering, well, why why us? And why can't people go back from whence they came? And that becomes the rub. No, I mean, there's no way for us to know. But for us to do a study like this and focus really on Barrie and Aurelia, I mean, I understand where Councillor Smith's coming from, but it feels a little bit vindictive. Like, we can't really unmake this social service soup, for example. Midland, for our part, we host a shelter that's county funded and operated. It's a coordinated access system, so it's not serving Midland or North Simcoe folks. It's serving whoever needs a bed when there's a bed available, just to use that example. The crime that we experience in our community is not solely perpetrated by homeless folks. However, there are people among the homelessness population that commit petty crimes in our community, some more serious crimes. That cost of that criminal activity is borne entirely by the town of Midland. I don't get to pass that around the county going, hey guys, help me out with my $1 million extra bill on OPP we're all suffering with. Because I have more crime, because more people are choosing to settle in what I colloquially will call the bottom of the bowl. We're blessed or cursed with all these social services and our proximity to the super jail and mental health center. People typically have the option of getting on a bus to Barrie, which I know drives Barrie bananas, and they've had to go to great expense to then further try and rehome folks, or they opt to stay around our area because we have the probation and parole office, the courthouse, the methadone clinic. What more could you want? Beautiful city by the bay. There seems to be commonality here. So I think in doing a study like this, unless we want to look at all of our municipalities and how things cost us or benefit us, I don't know that it's really fair to pick on Barrie and Aurelia for services that are, very expensive, the social services specifically, because there isn't really any way, to your point, to really judge where people come from and who's consuming. They're being consumed because that's where the services are. So then one could argue, well, just take my shelter out of the place, close down the methadone clinic, and let's go back to, Maybury days where we have nothing, and magically the problems will, move somewhere else. If that were true, part of the prickly side of me would say, hey, let's do it. But I know that's not going to be true because we'd have to get rid of the jail and Waypoint and the hospital and even Christian Island, which I've now learned discharges people into homelessness all the time. Whenever they want to get criminals off the island, they literally ban council resolution them into homelessness into our municipality. So, and they can. Like, it is a reality. We have no ability to control that. So I think this motion and what it's looking to do, although maybe well placed, I don't think it's really fair, and I don't even know that it's possible. I think the reality is where we are in the county for the greater good. That's the why we're together. We all pay into a systems approach to manage all of the various things the county does. And for us to pick apart and say, well, this guy should be paying more and I should be paying less, well, I think we could all get on that bandwagon, because I'd love nothing more than to move some of the costs of all my crime and all the other things that go along with it in our community to the rest of the county, and heck, to the whole province if I could, because we're the recipients of people who have needs that are not from our community, and that's just the way it works. So for my part, I get where this is coming from, but I think it's a lot of work from the staff's time, and all it's going to do is sow division, when I think what we really need to do is come together more.
Thank you. I have Councillors Snell and Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Through the chair, I don't, in all due respect, I don't think this is about picking on Barrie or Aurelia specifically. This is about the difference that we have separated cities, and then we have the rest of us that are all in the same collective agreement. But I do agree with you in regards to being able to get into the minutiae of who's from where and bleeding on those services, because ultimately that comes down to the data management systems. even just to be able to do a postal code search or a city search to really be able to identify the level of consumption by each of our municipalities. However, that being said, I think that information is very important to this table and to this House, because it would be just from an operations perspective to be able to see, where is there a little bit more demand. That would really be up to the staff to see if your CRMs are able to get into those levels of details, and perhaps in your down the road planning, maybe that's something that we consider to invest in if we want this level of depth of details. The assets, that's easy to pull. Thank you.
You have Councillor Smith and Rawson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Warden. I just need to be clear, there is absolutely nothing vindictive about this. The Mayor of Barrie indicated in the House today, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically that the City of Barrie was treated unfairly because of how they had to pay their costs over 10 years versus the rest of the county over a longer period of time. And he's concerned with that, and I understand that, and he's representing the people of Barrie. Good on him. He's doing his job. But at the end of the day, it's more about, there's more to all of this than just the fact that whether or not the service or the asset lies in the City of Barrie or the town of Wasaga Beach. What I can tell you is that when one of our assets from the county, social housing, for example, county offices, services, lie within your municipality, there is a huge advantage and plus to the municipality that service lies in. People use these services for the most part out of convenience. I will tell you that if you live in Oro-Medonte, for example, it's difficult to get to a service if you have to go to where these services are and lie and are available. If you live in the city of Barrie, it's very easy to get to all of the services you probably require. Easier in Wasaga Beach than perhaps Clearview, as an example. So there's much more to this than just where the assets lie. And I agree we can't break down where people come from. It's really none of our business. But however, I will tell you that people who live in Wasaga Beach, if there's affordable housing units available in Barrie, they will go there possibly because they have no other choice, but it's not something they want to do. So again, I want to be very clear. No vindictiveness here in any way, shape, or form. We also heard today that, this is really about math. And I agree. It is about math. But math on many different levels and for many different reasons. And I think it's vitally important that this House, moving forward, to make good decisions with respect to the County of Simcoe as a whole, including our separated cities, for the greater good. This is information we should all have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rawson?
Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Smith for his courage and leadership in stepping up to look out for the interests of all our member municipalities. And I think what I'm hearing is an assessment is really about value for money. And what is the value for money that the county offers to the county and our separated cities? And I think we can look at it from a simple context of, we'll use ambulance services, paramedic services we provide in the county. What I'm hearing is from a value perspective, if we staff 1 or 2 vehicles in the city of Barrie, but 1 vehicle is every day coming from Wasaga, Craigers, Oro, Coldwater, what's that value for money? And I think that's what we're just looking for, is what does the data and the numbers look like as we look at the shared service agreement and how we need to reassess that. I think that's what I'm hearing and what I appreciate. And thank you, Councillor Smith, for your leadership.
Councillor Norcross.
Thanks, Your Worship, to you. And I just want to touch in on that. I mean, we're obviously having the conversation. There's 2 sides to it. Is there value for service on one side? And, we look at the member municipalities. Are we getting value for service? Or is there ways we can provide services better? Because ultimately, that's our goal. We want to provide them as efficiently, cheaply as possible, but make sure we provide as many services as we can to our residents. In order to do that, we need to have this conversation. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. We do, but it's got to be 2 sides. And we have to have all the information from both sides. And that's how we can make a rational decision and decide ultimately, how do we improve the service? For me, I'm not looking to see who pays more, who receives less. I just want to see, are we doing the best with what we have? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mayor Nuttall?
Yeah, I think it's been a good debate. I do feel for my friend from Midland. I think that they've now inherited a problem that we inherited from those to the south of us, and it's only going to get more difficult throughout. Oromodonte, it's the first time that I can recall going down the rail trail and seeing tents. Former resident there, and certainly represented Oromodonte as well in the federal legislature. It's a problem that is not going to stop in Midland. It's going to spread throughout, whether there are services there or not, to your point, to the Mayor of Midland. And when looking at this, if this passes, I would encourage some sort of projection as well, because, well, let's just use the rail trail as an example. There is nobody in Oromodonte to go and figure out how to help those people who are sitting in tents. MENA will move assets from elsewhere, likely from City of Barrie or Orillia, depending on what it's closest to, when requested from members of Oromodonte Council. But it just doesn't exist at this point. So projecting out the future in terms of what we've seen happening in our urban and suburban areas throughout the county and inside the City of Barrie or Orillia is really necessary if this passes. And the final piece, I think, that we need to really consider on the go forward is where the Mayor of Wasaga Beach may look at it as, well, the City of Barrie gets all the services. There are many, 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 many people in the City of Barrie who are saying, why are you putting all the services here? Just being honest. So, if you are looking for this overall conversation, because I am, I think it's a good conversation to have. And I think that it'll end up with everybody feeling they lost a little, which means you probably got a good thing going on. The final piece, and the reason that I brought this up, is we're about to go into our budget. It is a strong mayor budget, meaning it's my budget. And an item that I've identified is the way that this agreement stands today. And the impact, if it was pushed through in a 2025 budget instead of a 2026 or 2027, would be immediate for you. Now, I'm not looking to go down that road. Doesn't mean my council won't, though. I'm not looking to go down that road today. But as you're projecting out going forward, if there's a change in the way that the capital pools are done with municipalities and it becomes, let's say it just goes from 10 years to 30 years, well, that's easy math. It means that you receive a third every year of what you would have into your capital reserves or straight into the projects. That's going to have an impact on your budgeting, right? So that's the premise of the conversation that I wanted to bring forth today is you are projecting out on your capital plan, you are approving a capital plan, but there's this other place over here, a lot smaller geographically, called the City of Barrie, and we're doing our own budgeting and our own plan, and this is high, high, high on our radar. Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I think we've had a fruitful conversation. I'm going to call for a vote.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. The vote has been called. It's been moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Bell that staff report on the asset and service mix between the County of Simcoe, member municipalities, and the separated cities of Barrie and Orillia. Council, all those in favor? And that has carried. And I will now turn to Vice Chair McDonald, moving on to our human services.
Thank you, Deputy Warden.
We'll go down to human service consent. And can I have it moved by alternate Henry Sander and Councillor Miskimins? Okay. That the following consent items having been given due consideration be received. We have 6.1, draft Simcoe County Housing Corporation minutes, October 22, 2024. And there's a draft of Simcoe County Housing Board, October 22, 2024 minutes. And we have 6.2, CCW 2024-2295, Emergency Management Support to Long-Term Care Facility, CCW 2024-295. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Human Services, Community Services, Business Intelligence, and System Planning. I will now turn the meeting over to GM Fazayas Baguette to provide an update regarding deferred items CCW 2024-261 YMCA of Simcoe, Muskoka 24 capital funding request. GM.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, this is just it was a deferred report that County Council had asked us to defer and get some answers before deciding on the recommendation. We as staff are still in the same position to make the same recommendation for the funding pocket. If just to provide a quick summary of the original report, this was the request from the YMCA to assist us, to ask for assistance to help them on their capital development of their new community center. And we've conditioned kind of our recommendation on three general areas. One, that the project continue and be on time, and major significant milestones are reached in order to break out the payments according to those milestones. Number two, that the funding go towards creating 14 spaces of youth transitional supportive housing, which is a key part of our 10-year homelessness prevention strategy, which is desperately needed as earlier discussions in the city of Barrie. And number four, number three, that the YMCA engage with our local immigration and partnership to see if some of the design of the space can host a cultural center for newcomers as a part of a broader part of our local immigration partnerships resettlement strategy for the county of Simcoe. So those are the main components of our conditioning to do this, as we see that a space like this could be certainly utilized, especially in the South Barrie and connecting to South Simcoe, where a majority of our newcomers reside and seek services. So in response to those three components and the recommendation, County Council had asked that we confirm that the City of Barrie has made some contributions to the project as well, that the Province of Ontario has made some contributions, and then the other question was in terms of the land agreement and land use agreement that the City of Barrie has done. So we do have those answers if we need to share that in detail.
Okay. Thank you, GM. From Council, is there anyone that wishes to have any questions for GM? Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Chair. I would appreciate hearing that information because we were speaking specifically in regards to the land lease and versus giving the land and DC reduction. Obviously, that's a key component that's going to impact the budget of this project. Myself, I'm fully in favor. I know we need youth beds specifically and daycare spaces, but that was a question that I had. And also too, in regards to, if I could ask a supplemental, there's about 8.1 million still remaining in funding gap. How's the strategy going to for the YMCA to fill that? Please and thank you.
Through the chair, I'm going to ask our partners from the YMCA who are prepared to answer those questions, provide both of those answers.
All right, thank you for that question, and good morning. To answer the very last question, the board has met and looked at a total project cost of this building now at $72 million. And we have looked at the funding sources that we have to date, and the board has asked us to come back with some options on how to fund the gap and look at a number of things, whether it's going back for more grants, whether it's looking at more fundraising or looking at a loan. So those are the options that the board has asked us to come back with to close the gap. So the other question, we will be going to council in the new year, likely February, to go before council to ask about waiving or decreasing the development charges. So that will come after we have some amendments that we've had to make to our building because of the costs rising. So that's going back to the city for site plan amendment approval in the new year, and we'll go to council shortly after that to ask for the waiving of the development charges.
Is there any other council member that wishes to speak? Go ahead, Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't here for the last meeting. Unfortunately, I was in the legislature in Toronto, and so I couldn't participate, but certainly got the Coles notes from Councillor Negussi and Councillor Rietma. And I'd like to provide some clarity on the contributions from the City of Barrie. First of all, we have a grant that's been accepted in the millions of dollars from the City of Barrie. I'm looking to the wide. Is that out public yet or not? It is? Perfect. So $2.5 million as I go to jail for breaking confidence. That's $2.5 million that's been approved by the City of Barrie to support the project. On top of that, when I was elected mayor, I stood up there, gala, I think it was, and I said that I would make sure that this project actually got done. And I went and found a way that allowed them to have no land costs associated. There was 2 previous parcels that were looked at in downtown Barrie. Both parcels came with massive parking issues. One of them not having the parking, the other one, the parking could be created, but when you're spending $50,000 to $60,000 per parking spot, it makes it unaffordable. So we went, and I say we, I went to my council and said, I would like to move this over to the southeast corner. The YMCA went and did a study. The study substantiated that the southeast corner of the city was in need, and we came up with a lease. That lease is for 2 acres plus parking, okay? So the building's footprint and the area around the building is roughly 2 acres, but then you've got parking around that that's set aside for the YMCA. So 3 acres. 3 acres at the corner of Mapleview and Bayview Drive is a $150,000 an acre lease. And we know that because that's what Park Place charged for a lease agreement at the corner right across the street, and that was 6 years ago. So I'm using very conservative dollars. You're talking $450,000 a year and 49 years. It's over $20 million in land contributions. Our estimated value, if we were just sell it, right? Let's say if we were just selling this, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million an acre. Meaning, if we were to just give them the land, it's a $15 million contribution on top of the 2.5 that we have already done. In this plan, they saved $20 million on parking that they would have had to pay previously. The financial implication to the city at the same time was there was a purchase of land previously. So the city has foregone $15 million in revenue from land sales, and we're foregoing the lease costs of $20 million over the life of the lease on top of that, and we're putting in the $2.5 million. Now, my understanding is the support from the County of Simcoe for this project is related to the transitional housing. And if that's the case, then it's likely coming from an area where the city is actually a contributor to the funds that then get dispersed. Meaning that the city of Barrie, whether it's 20% or 25%, is on the hook for somewhere between $1 million and $1.25 million of the county's contribution. So we're now into the, I don't know, $40 million in movement from where it was when I took over as mayor. And I think it's really important that these contributions are recognized by the County of Simcoe, because this is not just for Barrie folks. When there is a youth in one of your municipalities that is no longer at home, they inevitably go to the closest city, which in most scenarios is going to end up in the city of Barrie. And what the YMCA is putting forward is not just a building for recreation, it's literally beds. And not just beds, it's transitional, not just shelter beds. All of that to be said, yesterday I used strong mayor powers to waive the fees for Youth Haven to build their shelter. We haven't asked the county. I don't know if Youth Haven has or not. There's a big contribution there likely. Yeah, okay. So we've waived the fees there. I'm certainly open to waiving more fees over on the YMCA project. But I think it's a little difficult when the context is like, well, why isn't the city of Barrie doing more? You're being asked for $5 million, of which a portion is from us, and we've already taken a tens of millions of dollar contribution into this project to help make it happen. If the county doesn't want it to happen, and I know it's not the staff, but if the county as a board doesn't want it to happen, then let us know. That'll be a very clear message to the city of Barrie on how we fit into this social service network.
Is there anyone else like to speak to this? Seeing none, thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much. I'm very much in support of this program. I would like to know what the DC charges would be that they're coming to ask us to forgive, so we understand what the actual value is, if we had any idea of that. Is it 500,000, $1 million? They said that they would approach us on this later.
Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. I believe that at the design stage right now, it's a bit too early to quantify what that would be, and then at the permanent application stage is when you'd find out more. But it wouldn't be anything dissimilar to some of the county projects, including 20 Rose Street, the major one in Barrie, where we did receive a considerable incentive by the waivers. And I think here that the original grant for some of the waivers and incentives at 2.5 million, as the mayor shared. But the second round, when you get into capital charge, when the capital program gets more detailed, then we'd probably have a deeper number. But I can refer the question also to make sure I'm accurate on that with the YMCA, and maybe they can give some more information.
Thank you for that question. It would be going to the City of Barrie Council to waive the DC charges, not coming back to County Council. I don't know what those DC charges will be as of yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to this? Seeing none, thank you. So we'll go down to 7.1, CCW 2024.
Sorry, Madam Vice Chair, just if I'm over here. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Mayor. The portion that the county is looking at supporting, which is the transitional housing, there are no DCs, right? Because the province, when they brought in, I think it was either 119 or 21, they removed development charges on affordable housing, which includes transitional housing. So there's no DC from the city of Barrie, to the city of Barrie, sorry, associated with anything that is a social service support. Okay?
Thank you for that. So 7.1 is CCW 2024-261, YMCA of Simcoe, Muskoka 2024 capital funding. The request, item deferred from October 8th, 2024, Committee of the Whole meeting. Okay, so then it's, I'd ask for a mover, alternate Laurie Hutchison, and second by Councillor Anderson. Okay, that the item CCW 2024.
Madam Chair, I won't second that motion. I won't second that motion.
Councillor Bell, thank you. Okay, that the item CCW 2024-261 dated October 8th, 2024 regarding YMCA of Simcoe, Muskoka 2024 capital funding request be received, and that staff be directed to prepare any agreements in relation to the YMCA request necessary for the 2025 capital funding approved by council as outlined within item CCW 2024-261, and that subject to deliberation in the affirmative, the warden and the county clerk be authorized to execute all agreements and documents necessary to carry out the YMCA request outlined in this report and any of its components. So then I'll turn this meeting over again to GM Faiz Beguet. Oh, okay. All in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. And then I'll go back to GM. Okay. We'll go down to Human Services, Long-Term Care, Committee of Management. Okay, so 8.1 CCW 2024-287 base funding increase for community services. Okay, just a sec here. So could I ask that Councillor Norcross move it and second by Councillor Walker? That is okay. Okay, that the item CCW 2024-287 dated November 12th, 2024 regarding 2024-2025 base funding increase for community service be received. And maybe I'll just ask if General Manager St. Clair would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a positive story. It's an increase to our base funding to our 5 community programs. We're receiving 3% towards compensation, wage, salary, and benefits for our staff, and 1% towards other costs such as equipment, supplies, et cetera. So we are very pleased to receive this increase in base funding. And I will note all 5 programs operate totally on provincial dollars. So this is a great news story. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this? I'm seeing none. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Number 8.2, CCW 2024-288, Georgian Manor 16-bed project pre-occupancy review requirements. Can I ask for alternate Councillor Broderick to move it? Okay, and then Councillor Fowler to second that. Thank you. And that item, CCW 2024-288, dated November 12, 2024, regarding Georgian Manor 16-bed project pre-occupancy review requirements be received. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Seeing none. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay. And is there any other matters for consideration? Seeing none, I'll move it back to Deputy Warden. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now turn to Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. We're at item 10.1, which is one consent item that is on the agenda today, which is the Trails Connecting Communities Grant Program Annual Update. Are there any questions or comments on this update? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the recommendation as printed? Councillor Laux and Councillor Fryer, that the following consent item have been given due consideration be received. All those in favor? That is carried. The next item under Corporate Services Planning is CCW 2024-253, Request for Approval, Township of Clearview Official Plan. Questions or comments on the Township Official Plan? Councillor Cox.
Yeah, just through the chair, I have a question. It's on page 8. And I would think it's probably going to affect a lot of official plans that are coming forward. It's on the non-decision, and I just wondered where our official plan amendment 7 was with the province.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm sorry,
I know, okay.
GM Elliott.
Thank you. Back to the chair. I'm going to direct that question to our Chief Planner and Director of Planning Services, Nathan Westendorp, who can answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and GM Elliott. That's a fantastic question, Councillor Cox. We understand that COPA 7, as we affectionately call it, is still with the province under review. The advancement towards approval of all of our growth numbers was delayed by some other matters that were related to the City of Toronto and other regional OPs that needed to be addressed, and we were just simply in the queue. We do know that they are actively working on it, and we continue to meet with them regularly to get updates as much as they're able to share at this point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Measures and alternate Councillor Broderick. That item CCW 2024-253 dated November 12, 2024 regarding the request for approval of the Township of Clearview official plan be received and that the Township of Clearview official plan be adopted by the Township of Clearview bylaw 2024-38 on May 27, 2024 and modified as per Schedule 3 to item CCW 2024-253 dated November 12, 2024 be approved. That the county's approval does not apply to the following non-decisions. A non-decision applies to various sections of the OP that reference the 2051 planning horizon for growth and development of the plan. The specific partial policies include the 2024 and 2051 column data in the following tables within policy section 1.2.3. Table 1.1, target distribution of population growth to 2051. Table 1.2, projected employment growth in Clearview. Table 1.3, target distribution of new dwelling units. Table 1.4, target share of housing density types per settlement area, and that notice of decision of the official plan approval for the Township of Clearview be provided in accordance with the Planning Act. All those in favor? That is carried. Are there any other matters of consideration for corporate services today? Seeing none, I'll pass it back to you, Deputy.
Thank you. And I will now turn to Chair Cox for performance management.
13.1, the following consent item having been given due consideration be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder to put it on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Miniskin, second by Councillor Fryer, that the letter dated October 25th in the town of Wasaga Beach regarding resolution from the town of Wasaga Beach re-OPP detachment billing increases. And any questions, we will direct them to GM Wilcox. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And, you know, the town of Wasaga Beach put this motion forward at our council, which passed unanimously. And as we all know, we're all facing the same issue well, most of us, I would say 95% of us are facing the same issue with respect to the OPP and the increases that we're seeing this year, approximately 23% across the province, affecting some 329 municipalities. And this is quite clearly not sustainable. And when I look at the county of Simcoe and the increases alone within the county of Simcoe, and our regular costs on an annual basis across the county of Simcoe for the OPP policing, I think it would be a smart move on behalf of this House to have a feasibility study done with respect to the county looking at county-wide policing. We have 2 municipalities within our county that have policing now. The South Simcoe Police Force, which is an amazing police force in my opinion. They do an excellent job. Anyone I have talked to about the policing from South Simcoe is quite happy. And we all know that policing is not cheap and it's never going to be cheap. But we do have to look for better solutions to what we have today. And what I would say about having municipal policing is that, you know, in my experience over the years, 3 different municipalities where I have seen policing go from municipal policing to Ontario provincial policing, there is a significant difference in the model in its entirety. And there is a very different look and feel as to how that police force integrates and works with the community. And then, of course, today, most importantly, is the costs of this. And I want to be very clear, Madam Chair, that this request has absolutely nothing to do with the women and the men on the front line, the boots on the ground within any of our municipalities. I couldn't be happier than I am with the work that our OPP officers do. But they face significant challenges based on the challenges faced by the organization. And so, I would ask today that this House consider supporting, the County of Simcoe doing a feasibility study and coming back to this House on the possibility of a county-wide police force. And then B, that we ask that the warden also write a letter representing the 16 municipalities within the county with respect to policing and what it is that's required with respect to this current increase. You know, we have asked for the province to reduce it to 5% and for them to eat the balance. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. I think it's very unreasonable for these increases to come to us like this. In the town of Wasaga Beach, just the overtime amount alone in our increase of $1.3 million equates to 2,000 hours, which is 5 full-time police officers that the overtime is. And what we know is that the Ontario Provincial Police has a great shortage of officers today. And that is very taxing on the officers they do have. I've talked to many of them. I sympathize with them. But it's very taxing on our communities, and quite frankly, I think it leaves us a little vulnerable. And what that means, in my opinion, is that this overtime, until the large number and shortage within the Ontario Provincial Police gets fixed, which is going to take years, this overtime issue is not going to go away for us. Because every day in every municipality policed by the OPP, in my opinion, has overtime because we don't have enough officers, and so we're asking the officers we do have to do more. And there's a substantial cost to that. So that's why this is here today, and I would ask this House to please support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Yep. Councillor Evans, then Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Appreciate the motion. I do have one concern, though. I think we're putting the cart before the horse here a bit. First of all, I do agree with your second motion in terms of putting a letter together on behalf of the County of Simcoe to the Inspector General. Perhaps you've heard more, but I have not heard anything back from the OPP in terms of a request for a conversation with the OPP. I know there was an initial conference call scheduled that was canceled at the last minute, but I would like to give them the opportunity, especially the Inspector General, who of the OPP is the one that's responsible for dealing with municipal governments, to come back to us and to talk to us about this. And I'm fully in support. I know some of the municipalities have already put together motions and letters to the OPP. We haven't in our municipality, but we'd certainly be open to participating in that. I'm a little leery of moving to the first step right off the bat in terms of county-wide police force on 2 levels. First of all, I don't believe in it. I think it's going to be a lot more expensive than anybody ever thinks. There's a lot of infrastructure to set up. I know that there's some neighboring municipalities that have more experience with this than I in terms of smaller police forces. I'm definitely reluctant in terms of moving to that step right off the bat until we hear back from them. Secondly, be it OPP or be it South Simcoe or North Simcoe, perhaps a police force, in my mind, is still going to be the same person that's going to be driving around in the car and taking care of our community, be it what they might be called or what police force they might be associated with. So I'm a little concerned of the impression that they would get of the County of Simcoe that we would immediately move to consider a corollary police force due to perceived inefficiencies or costs associated therewith. And I'm hesitant to move forward with that. I'm fully supportive of your motion B, of a letter signed by the warden on behalf of all of us in the County of Simcoe, asking for participation and a conference with the Inspector General to be able to go over the rationale and the understanding. And frankly, my concern, I mentioned it to a couple of people here today, the short and long-term implications of this. Is this something that is going to happen this year? Is this going to continue in the future? Is this something we have to plan for? So I think that that's the logical first step. And then if and when we decide that the next step of looking at a police force is in the best interest of the County of Simcoe, I would support that, but I'm not ready to do that at this time, nor burden staff with something until we have the full knowledge of what we need to do moving forward. So thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Smith, for bringing that forward. So I'd like to present the motion for a consolidated letter from the County of Simcoe asking for further information on the OPP increase. Thank you, Chair.
We'll hear from Councillor Gordon and then come back, okay? Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a split might be in order here. just to deal with these independently. So I'm going to muddy the water and add a little more to this. If we're going to send a letter, my suggestion is, and then the clerks already have the wording for this, that we formally request the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Minister of Solicitor General initiate a review of the OPP billing formula through the Auditor General to consider the fairness and equity of the formula, including how it accounts for OPP costs that should be borne by every ratepayer in the province, regardless of who polices their community, how it proportions additional costs to those communities who solely rely on the OPP for policing, and how it allows for additional charges to be assessed for calls for service when the staff were already on duty, paid for their time and efforts, and how the impact of the collective bargaining impact the financial capacity of small municipalities throughout the province. So in a nutshell, this formula that we've watched explained to us now for a few years, you know, it's a little unfair to say they're double dipping, but it's almost there. My background for 25 years was in municipal policing, and I worked on many budgets for my part, and the cost of a police service is staggeringly expensive, and it just continues to rise. Policing is expensive. But there is not a municipal service in the province that I'm aware of, I could probably venture to say the country, that provides their board with a budget that says, here's the cost of running and operating this police services, and I'm going to charge you per call we got. This kind of voodoo was something that was created by the province when they, you know, decided to get into the predatory practice of taking over small municipal police services, you know, with the one ring to rule them all mentality. We've now, you know, we've been paying this for a while, and we knew that they were in negotiations, and the way these budget contract talks work, I know as a former union executive or association, we called it in policing, is that it's a leapfrog. So for now, the OPP is the highest paid police service in the province. Until Toronto Police do their contract, they'll one-up them because they'll start with that. And this is just the way the cycle works. We're not going to escape out of that. The arbitration system is a whole other animal where if the board tries to dig in, you know, arbitration, you rarely win in arbitration. So there's a whole bunch of compounding issues here that makes policing is going to continue to be expensive. And clearly everyone's struggling to attract recruits. It's not the kind of career that a lot of people want to get into for public scrutiny, for violence, for just there's a whole bunch of reasons why people are not drawn into policing despite the compensation. But all that culminates in this billing model that's unique to OPP, where it sees municipalities charged for not only what they assess to be the base cost of policing, and they've got a little chart and graph that they sell us on, that has a lot of things that involve the actual core operations of a provincial police service over on the left side, which is left to be divvied up with the municipalities. And it's not even on a one-to-one ratio for calls. So as I say to my residents, I can't even ask you to call the police list. You know, someone broke into your car last night and rifled through and didn't get anything. Don't call the cops because we've got to save money. That doesn't work like that because we're assessed a you know, fractional percentage of all the work that the OPP does in the province. So my belief is that this billing model is unfair and has been since inception, and that you know, to really test that metal, it would be to have the ministry or the province send this model to the Auditor General for review and just see whether, you know, I'm off base and so is every other police executive who ever put together a budget, and to pick this apart and try and unmake the soup seems to be the word of the day for me, because it's just too obfuscated, and I think we can reasonably project that every 3 to 4 years when a police contract's renegotiated and the OPP become the highest paid police in the province again, that's the way it's always going to be, that this is going to keep happening to us. And without any type of buffer, and since we can't run deficits, and I don't lament that, but I'm just saying it's a stated fact, we don't have that kind of money to put away in our reserves and manage our infrastructure and our asset management and everything else to accommodate these large negotiations and salaries. So when you couple our complete inability to manage the negotiations of salaries for OPP and the fact that they're banging us an assessed value for every call that they do that ranges in severity from, you know, minor things like a traffic accident to a homicide, you know, and they're billing us based on that, even though the staff are all on duty and getting paid whether there's one call that shift or 50, there's something not right about this formula, in my opinion. So what I'm asking for the House to consider is if we're going to send in this letter to the province, which I support, asking for, you know, some sanity and some sustainability, that we tack on this ask to have the billing model sent to the Auditor General We can't do that on our own. Before making this, I called the Auditor General's office and tried to understand how the process works. It has to be the government that sends it. So, you know, we could put this on a letter and they ignore it, fair enough, but at least we've tried and we've called out what appears to be a real inequity in the billing that is not mirrored by any other municipal police service. You pay for the cost of policing, all in, and you have to pay the overtime too. And then when the overtime becomes predictable, you hire more people if you can to flatten that curve. You know, prisoner transport and all that, the add-ons, we all see our bill. So I really believe that this funding formula needs some scrutiny for someone with no bias, no skin in the game, and I'm really hopeful that A, we'll add this on to the request if it passes, and B, that the province will, for their own defense, send this through to have kind of like a sober second thought on how they arrive at the math and how it's basically crushing municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon. I'm going to, do you want to speak now? Because I think we are going to split the motion, but I'll let Councillor Dolan speak and then we'll go to the clerk.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So first of all, thank you, Councillor Smith. I couldn't agree more. South Simcoe Police are amazing. Very thrilled with the service that we get from them. It's very proactive. They're very community-minded. But you get what you pay for. So while I understand my friends here in the House are dealing with double-digit increases, like in the 30%, some of you, if you take a look, not of that percentage increase, but take a look of the per household charge for police, you'll find that you're still significantly lower than South Simcoe Police is. You are getting closer, you're closing that gap a bit, but it's still significantly lower. And having said that, I'm still 100% in favor of local policing and really am very proud of the men and women of South Simcoe Police. The idea of the Auditor General, I think, is a very good one. I've been around long enough to know that the last time that the OPP said there was unfair billing model and they wanted the billing model changed, they entrusted AMO to do that work, and it was terribly divisive. The problem with that is the losers were very vocal and said, but, you know, we're going to have to pay this much more. But the winners were very quiet and didn't say anything because they want to take those savings and work them into their next year's budget. So it did become, so I know that if it was asked again, AMO would probably say no. But the Auditor General, I think, would be a very good place to actually have those conversations. But at the end of the day, it's expensive and it's a big bill. So the less the municipalities pay, the more the province pays. And then you'll get the big 6 or big 10 or whatever they're called, the Durhams, the Yorks, the Torontos, the Ottawas, who will say, well, wait a second, then if we have more than a 5% increase, the province should pay for that as well. So those are just my 2 cents worth throwing in. But I think that asking at this point for, I think what would be eye-opening first is to ask staff to reach out and get a per-cost household for policing for each municipality before going for the whole, let's look at a county-wide force. Because even if you've got that kind of consolidation, therefore saving because there's more of us, it's still, I think, a number that would make you gasp a little. Thank you.
Do you want to keep going with the speaking? I will let the clerk.
If I could, Madam Chair, I've listened to the discussion and there's a couple of things. First, we had a motion just to receive this from Councillor Miskimins and Councillor Fryer. It's more or less been pulled at this point, so if those councillors are okay with that motion being withdrawn to get a couple other of the motions on the floor here. I think sort of splitting the question here between 2 issues, the feasibility study request in the letter from the town of Wasaga Beach, that could be dealt with first or second. And then the other matter is sort of from an advocacy perspective, that the warden write a letter to the Ministry of the Solicitor General with concerns regarding the significant OPP 2025 billing increase for County of Simcoe member municipalities that are serviced by the OPP. And then additionally, if there's an amendment to that motion for the letter from the warden, to Councillor Gordon's point, that the letter also be sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs with a request to initiate a review. I think that could be taken as an amendment. So if you can indulge me, Madam Chair, I'll just put this up on screen, and I just want to check, because there's nothing currently on the floor at this time. And maybe we could just go to Mayor Smith to see what issue he'd like dealt with first of the feasibility study there.
Thank you. If I may, Madam Chair, before I answer that question, if I may speak to it. So I very much appreciate the comments here and absolutely willing to accept a friendly amendment with respect to Councillor Gordon's addition. I think that's a brilliant idea. Back to my friend Councillor Evans' comments, I think it's important that we understand a couple of things here. You might think this is putting the cart ahead of the horse. I would think that before you sent a bill out to everybody with a 23 to 27 or 30% increase, you may have wanted to consult with those individuals first. That it would be putting the cart ahead of the horse as well, I could argue. Having said that, and with respect to that increase, I understand that we all like to know what's coming down the pipe so we can plan for it. I don't know about the rest of you folks in this House, but the town of Wasaga Beach, we cannot plan for 23% increases. That's just not feasible. Whether we have it 1 year or we have it every year, it's just not doable, period. With respect to the OPP in our communities, and again, all the respect in the world for the boots on the ground, we have very little say as a municipality or as a group of municipalities within the detachment as to how policing is conducted in our municipalities. Even with the new detachment boards today, the regulations around that really do limit us a great deal as to what input we have. And I would argue that, and I'm sure perhaps the OPP may argue otherwise because I've heard the argument, that we know best in our communities what policing is required, where it's required, when it's required. Not that they're not the experts, but with a municipal police force, in most cases, I would think when council or the board speaks with them, they understand it as well, and they get it because they're there. When you're dealing with a larger detachment that has an area that is overwhelming, in my opinion, the Huronia West detachment, if an officer with lights and sirens had to go from one end of Huronia West to the other, and I have examples of those instances with respect to spousal abuse calls, where it has to have 2 officers, and we're down to 2 officers on duty because of call-ins and so on. What does the officer do? Do they go and help their partner, or do they now head to the other end of the county? Officers shouldn't have to make those decisions, quite frankly. They should know that when they go into a dangerous situation, someone's going to be there to back them up. And I don't believe that is the case all the time here now. And so we need to have more say in that. And I think we get that also with our own police forces. And I accept the fact that perhaps a county-wide police force may be more expensive. To what level? Feasibility study will tell us that. But to Chair Dolan's point, you get what you pay for. And I don't think anyone in this House has a problem with paying for policing. But we want to make sure that we get good, personal, quality, safety, and policing services for our dollar. And I know that the officers of the OPP today are doing their absolute best to do that. But it's just not happening, unfortunately, everywhere. And I can tell you that, you call a police officer today for a situation in the town of Midland, because I have businesses there. The time for an officer to get there today compared to when it was a municipal police force is about 10 minutes difference on average. That's significant. And so I encourage this House to support this. And if it's premature, and we find out in the end it's premature because the Solicitor General comes down and fixes everything, great. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And we can stop. But time is of the essence because years, as we all know, go by very quickly. And as your hair gets grayer, it goes a hell of a lot quicker. And so to wait on something this important, there are very few things in our municipalities that are more important than policing or our fire or our paramedics. Those are the times when we call those folks, we need them, and we need them yesterday. So to wait on this, I would argue, would be the wrong decision. To move forward and to look at this and to get the information, I believe is the right thing for us to do, right for our citizens in all of our municipalities. And if, you know, God willing, you know, the ministry decides to fix all this, great. I don't think that'll be the case. Thank you very much. Now, with respect to the question, I have no issue amending it, and I'll look to the clerk. What was the other question?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I think there's two issues at play here. The first is the feasibility study request in the letter from the town of Wasaga Beach. And that could be dealt with first or second, like I said. And then I think there's, from what I've been hearing from the members, sort of an advocacy approach desire for this. So, you know, I just wanted some clarity from the member maybe about which one you'd like to move first and have the discussion on.
I'm fine to move them in the order they're in now, but it really doesn't matter, just as long as they're both on the floor and that we include the friendly amendment from Councillor Gordon.
Sure. Could I, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, if I could, and just one more point of clarification, if I could, Councillor Smith. The go or no go on a feasibility study, my recommendation here is to refer the matter to staff, to give staff the opportunity to look at this, given the county currently has no jurisdiction. There's been some changes legislatively, and I think there's some other financial, legal implications that might want to be shared with committee or council before actually going ahead with a feasibility study, and therefore my recommendation would be to refer it to staff, and then we can take a look at the request and bring back some more information.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I have all the confidence in the world in our staff here, and I'm absolutely fine with that.
Okay, and then Madam Chair, you just need a seconder for the motion.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Snell. And I also have a question from Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, through the chair. I was actually just going to suggest what the clerk just did, so that's fine. To the second part, I just want to speak briefly on a letter. Again, okay. It's great to see.
So let's just do this one first, if it's okay with you, and then you can speak to the next motion?
Sure.
Is that the one you want? Okay.
I'm not suggesting any changes or
No,
anything. So
just, okay. Let's, Councillor Lavoie.
Yes, sorry. Thank you very much. Through you, I just want to clarify, are we looking at the entirety of the county? In other words, will this include the South Simcoe Police Force? And what does it mean to the city of Orillia? Will it become an isolated OPP detachment?
I'm going to refer to the clerk, but I would think that we need to have the study first before we decide where that we go with that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, and I don't know if GM Wilcox has additional comments to make on this, but I think that would be looked at as far as the report back from staff before going down the road of a feasibility study. It would look at sort of all the considerations that would need to be part of that feasibility study, and I don't know if GM Wilcox had any additional info.
Just if I may, through the chair, that is some of the considerations that we have to take into account before we define what a feasibility study is and defining what it's going to cover. So absolutely, those will be considered. Thank you.
And I would like to just speak to the fact that maybe at the end it says be referred to staff for a report, so they don't think there's a feasibility study happen, if you don't mind. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Mine just went by. Yep, Councillor Hamlin.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if it's a matter for the feasibility study or for the report back, but one thing on my mind I just wanted to mention is having, you know, as a member of our police detachment board, So many decisions are made at the provincial level of the OPP, and we can't really impact them. Everything from, you know, what kind of service we want provided. We had a big discussion about a year ago. They didn't have a category, just as an example, for intimate partner violence. It was like assault. So anyway, but they couldn't change the form. Do you see what I mean? So I just would like to know, whatever stage it is, when we're looking at this, what are the things beyond the budget that we should be taking into account when we look at whether we want a local force or an OPP force? And one of the things on my mind, as I say, is like, where will the directions come from? So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gordon.
Sorry about that. Did you say me? Okay, just speaking quickly to this and the concept of getting what you pay for. Very true, and I think that is the frustratingly, obvious point in this, is that, for Midland, for example, we get 20%, 26% increase, $1 million more, but we get nothing more for that. I mean, our community, I'm pretty sure, would be happy to, I'd drain the reserves for $1 million more worth of policing if I could. Actually have police in my community, not on my perimeters. Spend time doing enforcement in the community. We'd pay for that. And people are telling me, Bill, we'll pay for that. Just put the old police service back together. And I'm like, it isn't that simple. But the bottom line is we're not getting more for the money. And that's, I think, the catalyst for this. Now, I do need to caution that, Police Services Board, even under the new CSPA, you don't have operational control over your police department. You never did in the old Police Act either. You fund it, and you give tactical priorities to your chief, who then is tasked with implementing them in your community. So you set priorities, but you don't get into the weeds of how it works. You couldn't change form names. You couldn't change the classifications for VI-class and what UCRs and everything like that. That's out of your scope. So just also to manage expectations, if we were to reconstitute some kind of new police service, we would be able to control the budget, which would be awesome, because that's what we're talking about here. But we don't get to control the weeds. We would, a big department servicing all of Simcoe County, we may find that that distributed model of policing the OPP uses to try and spread the wealth around may still exist. Whereas if we all had our own little small community police services again, there's a dome around Midland, for example, and the police cars bang into it, and it's 30-second drive from one extreme to the other. That doesn't exist anymore, and it's really not financially possible for us to put back together. And even in our little world, if we put a North Simcoe police together, Tiny Tay, Midland, and Penetang machine, we'd still be looking at a distributed model because you can only have so many people on duty for so much cost, and we'd still end up with people deployed in the wrong spot for the wrong time of the call. It's how it happens.
Point of order. So, is there a question related to the motion?
Yeah, I'm speaking to the feasibility study and whether we would support it or not, and the realistic outcomes of it.
Okay.
So where I'm going with this, unless you're sustaining it, then I'll stop talking.
I think at this point we will sustain, and we do have, this is the portions specifically just for the report to be referred back to staff. Yep. So it's not moving forward with a feasibility study, it's having staff report back to us with more information to take the next step.
Okay. Thank you. We'll call the vote. Moved by Councillor Smith, second by Councillor Snell, that the request for the County of Simcoe to undertake a feasibility study for a county police force in the letter dated October 25th, 2024 from the town of Wasaga Beach regarding Ontario Provincial Police OPP detachment billing increases be referred to staff for a report back. Yes? Councillor Norcroft.
Well, sorry, House. I really apologize. I tried to say this earlier. I just want to make one point for clarification. Chair Dolan made a really good point. I pay approximately $400 per person. Lynn, my neighbor right beside me, you pay almost $700. So that has to be given consideration when you bring back the report for members of council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Carried. Do you want me to call opposed? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next motion. Please and thank you, Mr. Clerk.
So if I could, Madam Chair, if Councillor Smith would like to move that the warden write a letter to the Ministry of the Solicitor General with concerns regarding the significant OPP 2025 billing increase for County of Simcoe member municipalities serviced by OPP, that's one thing. If you'd like to sort of integrate the motion that Councillor Gordon had to also send that letter to the Minister of Municipal Affairs with a request to, look at with the Auditor General a billing review, that could be part of the same motion as well, or taken as an amendment. And this piece about the warden writing a letter with general concerns for all member municipalities serviced by OPP, that's the recommendation at this time from staff, I think, because there are other resolutions that will be coming from other municipalities. Since this agenda was published today, we've received correspondence from ESSA as well as Midland, so more letters will appear on the next agenda as well. So just a general sort of advocacy letter from the warden is the recommendation at this time, if the mover is okay with that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, so then just a question back to the clerk with respect to the amendment and what I believe is a very important addition from Councillor Gordon. Will we vote on that separately, or how will we deal with that?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's nothing on the floor right now. You can move that the warden send a letter to the Ministry of the Solicitor General, and an additional clause here, if you'd like, that the letter also be sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. But if there's sort of division on council, we could, get to a divided vote. But if the majority of council here is okay with those two clauses, then you can certainly move that, and we need a seconder for it.
So I'd be prepared to move that as amended then and include that.
Okay.
Councillor Gordon, would you like to second that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That the warden write a letter to the Ministry of the Solicitor General with concerns regarding the significant Ontario Provincial Police 2025 billing increase for the County of Simcoe member municipalities served by the OPP. And that the letter also be sent to the Minister of Municipal Affairs with a request to initiate a review of the OPP billing formula through the Auditor General to consider the fairness and equity of the formula, including how it accounts for OPP costs that should be borne by every ratepayer in the province, regardless of who polices their communities, how it proportions additional costs to these communities who rely solely on the OPP for policing, how it allows for additional charges to be assessed for calls for service when the staff are already on duty and being paid for their time and efforts, and how the impacts of collective bargaining impact the financial capacity of small municipalities throughout the province. Two questions. Okay, Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Snell.
Thank you, through the chair. And again, I do appreciate the advocacy of the warden's office to do this, because there is really no jurisdiction for the county. And I think this is the message that I would like to express to members of the House here is, as municipalities, we need to be doing this more so than the county. And we've had a long debate here about this, and again, I appreciate that the greater good that we try to come together and try to do this, but there is no jurisdictional part to the county for policing. And so a letter might do something, but it's not really putting any emphasis onto the province unless the municipalities do it, each of us at our local level.
So Councillor Anderson, would you like to CC to all the municipalities to see if they would like to send their support in? Can we do that? Thank you. Councillor Snell?
Thank you, through the chair. I fully support this amendment, and I really like the details that are in it. One piece that I would like to be considered is, in our community, we're quite unique that 25–30% of our landmass is provincially owned, and there is no breakdown for calls for services that are specific to the province's owned lands, and we all have owned lands by the province, so I would like to see that added in some of that detail of the request and report back, please.
Is that okay with the mover and seconder? Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, I just don't have any wording to that effect. Councillor Snell, if you'd like to move an amendment, or if it's a friendly amendment with the mover and seconder, I just need some clarity on what wording you're looking for.
Thank you for the clarity. I would suggest perhaps that where the sentence, the staff are already on duty and being paid for their time and efforts, comma, and reports, detailed reports come forward on calls that are made specifically regarding provincially owned lands, or something to that, not seeing anything in front of me, just sort of brainstorming that. But that's ideally what I'd like to know, is here we have, for example, just to be clear, Beach 1, Beach 2, all of our provincial beaches that are in our beautiful community, they get a significant number of emergency calls. Our fire department is going down servicing those areas already at the cost of the taxpayers. If I would love to see from the OPP how many calls out of our entire call list came from the provincially owned lands, is my point. Thank you.
I think there's probably another municipality that has the same issue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Cox. And if I may, just in the statement here where it says the formula including the accounts for OPP costs that should be borne by every ratepayer, comma, including the province of Ontario. And then that would be them as a ratepayer. So what costs should be borne to them? I figured that might capture that.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. If we could just, the province of Ontario as a landowner or as a ratepayer, like to just be very specific that we're asking for that. Thank you. That was a great suggestion, Chair.
I think Councillor Rawson would like to speak.
I think what my friend's saying was saying is the costs associated with the policing provincial institutions. And it covers all these
First of all, I have Councillor Lavoie, then Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, thank you very much, and I certainly appreciate the commentary with regard to the provincially or perhaps federally owned lands. Not certain if there are those. However, there are privately owned lands that also attract a lot of policing attention, such as Burrells Creek, and we can't manage to separate that. So if we could put privately owned large facilities, and the difficulty here is this could expand. So I'd caution us in creating a motion that might be overburdensome.
Thank you, and I apologize, Chair Cox. But I do, thank you. And to Councillor Lavoie's point, I think that where it says should be borne by every ratepayer, I think that that encompasses every ratepayer. If we want to pull it apart to include that the government, like the provincial government, whether it's lands or facilities, to be included in that, I can see. But otherwise, we're going to have 16 more suggestions and amendments because we all have hot pockets in our municipalities. So I think if we can try and keep this high level, that's what I'd like. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Okay, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Collingwood wins the award for the highest increase at 37%, just shy of $2 million this year. And so I am very much in support of this correspondence coming from the county, even without the jurisdiction to influence. Specifically, I do think that having a letter come from the warden does carry weight. I also encourage every member to consider sending a letter from their own community. I did that for our council last week. And I think I'll send another now that I'm looking at this amendment about, a suggestion to the Auditor General. And lastly, if I can suggest maybe to, my lawyer training coming out in me, you could say review of the OPP billing formula through the Auditor General to consider the fairness and equity of the formula, including without limitation. And then you can add, some examples. I think the clerk would know how to do this. I'll leave it with him. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to look at the clerk and have him just read, or do you want to change that, or do you feel that we've covered it?
So, Madam Chair, I might just suggest going back to the mover and seconder to consider what they might deem a friendly amendment. In this case, there's two issues, the without limitation that Councillor Hamlin just mentioned, and then maybe sort of an additional sentence in here about how costs are considered for like calls on provincial lands.
I think they've already said that's fine with them if we do the friendly amendment.
Madam Chair, if you just give me a moment to tweak the wording, and you can take any additional questions or comments from the floor.
Councillor Dolan.
Thank you. I think this does go back to what Councillor Anderson said originally, is that the motion from the warden should be more general advocacy for the greater good of all. And then anybody who has these particular little niggly hot spots in their municipality could also write a letter into the Solicitor General or the Auditor General as well.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think as it is pretty all-encompassing. I think the Auditor General is pretty bright. I think they'll understand what we're looking for. And I also think that once the Auditor General starts, they start. I don't think that's ever a pleasant thing for anybody. So I'm quite confident that they will cover everything that's required, and couldn't agree more with Councillor Dolan with respect to and Councillor Anderson. It is very important, and I too, to Councillor Hamlin's point, will be writing a second letter now to include even more. Thank you.
Okay, so is the mover and seconder, the mover and seconders okay with the additions that are in bold? Yes, Councillor Gordon.
Thanks. Just one tiny addition on where we send it. And when I was speaking with the Auditor General's office, they asked if this is successful, if they could receive a copy of what we're sending to the province to their email box called comments@auditor.on.ca for visibility. They don't drive it, but you know, if they knew about it, I don't know, we might have their little coffee meetings or whatever. Oh, did you get that letter? So that was their ask, is that we include that in the distribution list if we could.
Through Madam
That's
Chair.
comments@auditor.on.ca.
Through you, Madam Chair, if there's consent from the floor, we can certainly copy the letter to that email address at the province.
Okay. Do you want me to read it again, or can you all just see it and we'll be fine? Come on. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Okay. Are there any other matters for consideration in performance management? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Cox. As there's no closed session, we are now moving on to adjournment, and I will have it moved by Councillor McClellan, seconded by Councillor Walker, that the November 12th, 2024 meeting of the Committee of Whole be adjourned at 12:13 p.m. and our next scheduled meeting of Tuesday, November 26th for joint council and the Committee of the Whole. All those in favor? Oh, you're not in favor? Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. First of all, thank you, Deputy Warden, for chairing what was a pretty difficult procedural meeting to get through. And I'd like to ask the clerk if there's any way of finding out if this is the first time in the history of Simcoe County that the entire table was filled with females.
I would say it is past 30 years.
That's fantastic. Thank you. All those in favor of the adjournment? And that has carried.